If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description. Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200 plus audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon. Link is also provided in the description.
Chapter 21 Flames of Resolve. More chapters if we actually reach 400 Power Stones today. I will drop 3 extra chapters. Don't forget to review. Still nothing. After finishing off the monsters around her, Melly couldn't help but sigh. It had been 3 days since Mika decided to level up. During these 3 days, the 3 of them had been eating and sleeping in the dungeon, constantly searching for the infant dragon without a moment's rest. Despite their efforts, they still had no results. It's no use. The fog here is too thick, which really hampers our search. Ermit shook her head and looked at Mika, who hadn't said a word. Mika, we should go back and rest for a while. Even though my magic can restore physical strength, it can't restore mental fatigue. After 3 days, your mind must be reaching its limit. You're right. Hearing Ermit's concerned voice, Mika rubbed his temples with his fingers to alleviate his mental fatigue. Although Mika and his companions were still physically fine, their mental exhaustion was undeniable. Searching for the infant dragon in a foggy area required them to be constantly vigilant for any signs. This constant concentration quickly wore down their spirits. After 3 days, even though their magical power, mental energy, was still abundant, their spirits were extremely tired. We indeed need to go back and rest. Once we're refreshed, we can come back and explore again. I agree, let's go home. Melly readily agreed with the suggestion to return. Having reached a consensus, the 3 of them chuckled lightly and turned to head back. But at that moment, an unexpected change occurred. With the sound of rocks cracking, monsters began to emerge from the walls around them. Moreover, they were all troublesome beastmen. As large monsters and natural elite enemies, the beastmen were formidable foes for adventurers exploring this area. This is a monster feast. Melly immediately went on high alert. Simultaneously, a horde of imps swarmed in from both sides of the rocky chamber. We're surrounded. Looking around at the monsters filling the area, Melly's expression had never been so serious. It seems the dungeon has noticed our weakened state and wants to keep us here. We'll have to give it our all today. Melly twirled her staff gracefully, filled with battle spirit. On Mika's other side, the silent Ermit said nothing. She simply assumed a stance, ready to chant her magic as soon as the battle began. Wait. Mika extended his hand to stop them. Then, amid their puzzled gazes, he took off his backpack and handed it to Ermit, saying seriously, "Leave this to me. You two prepare to break through." "That's impossible. We won't leave you behind," Ermit quickly replied. In contrast, Melly, who roughly guessed Mika's intentions, looked worried. "Isn't this too risky? An adventurer who doesn't take risks can't become a hero." Mika responded firmly to Melly, then turned to Ermit. "Ermit, I'm not doing this to cover for you. I want to make this monster feast my adventure." With that, Mika slowly drew the long sword from his back and began chanting magic. "Ignite. With this circle of flames, protect me." As he chanted, crimson flames emerged from various parts of Mika's body, swirling around him. The temperature around them rapidly increased, and the air seemed to ignite, though this wasn't the end of the chant. "The fierce battle has begun, the horn of wailing is sounding. The dark end, the bright flame, hope is burning. The fire burns eternally, cutting through all." Vast crimson magic power coiled, condensed and compressed around the sword in Mika's hand, finally forming a blade of light attached to his sword. Looking at the beastmen and imps blocking their path, Mika swung his sword immediately. Triumphant sword of the Fire King. With Mika's shout, the blade of light attached to his sword shot forward. The searing blade of flame instantly incinerated everything in its path to ashes. As the magic power dissipated, the flaming blade slowly vanished, revealing a clear path back. "I don't." Before Ermit could speak, Mika grabbed her hand. "Don't leave here. I need you to stay outside and keep an eye on me. Only with you nearby can I fight with peace of mind." I understand." Knowing Ermit well, Mika quickly convinced her. "Take this and go quickly." Handing the high-quality long sword to Melly, Mika then drew another long sword she carried. Grabbing the great sword stuck in the ground, he fully prepared for battle. "You don't need any weapons? As expected of you, don't lose, Mika." "Good luck, Mika." Hearing their encouragement and watching them escape the monster's encirclement from the corner of his eye, Mika refocused and scrutinized his surroundings. There are over 200 monsters, including 70 beastmen. The rest are mostly imps, with a few silverback gorillas and armored rats. My body is in good condition, but I'm mentally fatigued, with half of my magic power remaining. However, my armor and weapons are newly replaced, so I'm ready for battle. The earlier triumphant sword of the Fire King had used up half of Mika's magic power, limiting his magic use in the upcoming battle. But that's no problem. With my current weapons, I can't use much magic anyway. Thanks to their accumulated wealth and deeper dungeon explorations, Ermid and Melly had upgraded Mika's equipment. As a key frontline fighter, the quality of his gear was crucial. So, while changing his armor, Mika also replaced his great sword with one that could withstand his flames. Although it required maintenance after each use, it was necessary. Mika didn't use his mother's first-tier longsword for this adventure. As mentioned by Hephaestus when Hestia asked her to forge a weapon for Bel, too sharp a weapon could ruin a talented low-level adventurer. Therefore, Hephaestus forged a weapon that could grow with Bel. Mika resonated deeply with Hephaestus's words. With that sword, Mika would be invincible on the upper floors, slaying any enemy with a single stroke. That wasn't adventure, it was merely swinging a sword, which wouldn't significantly enhance the divine blessing. After all, divine blessings aim to unlock potential, not just accumulate experience. Hence, for this adventure, Mika wouldn't use anything beyond his capabilities. He wanted a genuine adventure to transcend this great cause. Chapter 22 Dance of Death, 1 against 100, The Art of Combat. More chapters if we actually reach 400 power stones today. I will drop 3 extra chapters. Don't forget to review. Exhaling slowly, Mika's gaze gradually sharpened. At this moment, the path he had previously cleared was once again blocked by monsters, completely surrounding him. Roar! Roar! Squeak! Squeak! Various monster cries echoed continuously, growing closer and closer. The monsters were rapidly advancing towards Mika. Let the slaughter begin. Holding a weapon in each hand, Mika didn't wait for the monsters to attack, instead, he charged into the monster horde ahead. He knew very well that he couldn't let the monsters completely encircle him. Running swiftly across the grassy ground, the flames behind Mika's feet propelled him into the midst of the monster horde in an instant. Using his shield to fend off the front, Mika directly knocked away the monsters colliding with him head-on. With a swing of his flame-imbued greatsword, Mika executed a water surface slash, slaying several nearby monsters and clearing a space for himself to fight. A foothold is cleared. Mika steadied himself, immediately retracting the flames from his sword. Although the flame-imbued greatsword significantly increased his destructive power, his LV.2 magic couldn't sustain it for long. Moreover, the weapon's endurance meant Mika could only use magic at the most critical moments. For example, clearing space in the monster horde to unleash his full strength. Currently, Mika was fighting against 100. And these 100 were not all weak monsters. This was the 12th floor, the deepest part of the upper layers, where monsters were terrifyingly strong in physical abilities. But physical ability and combat strength were not the same. The difference lay in skill, experience, and awareness. These factors determined the gap between two individuals with the same physical abilities. And in these aspects, Mika surpassed these monsters. But that was it. After all, this was 1 against 100, where numerical advantage could negate the skill gap. Any attack from these powerful monsters was hard to withstand. So, Mika aimed to turn this 1 against 100 into 100 one-on-one battles. He would use his skill and endurance to defeat them. Therefore, he needed space where he could fully unleash his abilities. Without this space, being squeezed in the dense monster horde, even the highest skill would be hard to showcase. After all, the foundation of martial arts was footwork. Clang! A heavy wooden club slammed into Mika's shield, the heavy sound echoing through the monster horde. Tisk, I've never hated the weaponry here so much. From the 10th floor onward, the foggy environment had changed the rocky ground into a grassy field, with trees growing in the grasslands. These trees were not ordinary plants, they were natural armories in the dungeon. The half-beasts living here could easily pull these trees out, which then transformed into clubs, becoming the most handy weapons for the half-beasts, greatly enhancing their attack strength. A blow from a half-beast's club was unbearable even for Mika. With a strong shove, Mika redirected the half-beast's attack to the side, leaving it defenseless at the front. With a swift swing of his great sword, Mika cut off the half-beast's leg. The half-beast, losing a leg, fell towards Mika. Mika quickly jumped back, avoiding it, then decapitated the half-beast. What a hassle! Though Mika quickly dealt with the half-beast, it was still too slow for him. In this encircled situation, efficiency in killing was crucial. But the half-beast's size made it hard to kill in one hit, being too tall. A typical half-beast stood 3 meters high, its vital points unreachable by normal attacks. This was one reason why large monsters were tough to deal with. The most important thing now is to reduce the number of monsters, or my space will keep shrinking. I also can't stay in one place fighting, I need to keep moving. If half-beasts are hard to deal with, I'll kill the lesser demons first. Among the 100 monsters, most were lesser demons. If Mika could eliminate these lesser demons first, he wouldn't have to worry about being completely surrounded. As long as he wasn't entirely surrounded, Mika was confident he could defeat them all. Scanning the area, Mika spotted a group of lesser demons huddled together. Immediately, he turned and charged towards the lesser demons. Water breathing, 9th form, splashing water flow. This water breathing technique minimized landing time and area, allowing the user to move freely, suitable for combat in confined spaces. Now, Mika was heading into the monster horde with hardly any landing points. Dodging a half-beast's swinging club, Mika ran up the club, reaching the half-beast's shoulder, then leaped towards the lesser demons behind. Water breathing, 8th form, waterfall basin. Crashing into the lesser demon group, Mika killed the nearby lesser demons with one strike. But it wasn't over. With Mika's arrival, various water breathing techniques were unleashed. Water breathing, 3rd form, flowing dance. This technique allowed Mika to move like water, with astonishing speed, leaving after images among the lesser demons. Other techniques like 1st form, water surface / and 3rd form, striking tide were continuously used, slaying the surrounding lesser demons. But this didn't last long. Unlike other monsters, lesser demons had some semblance of intelligence. They coordinated, fighting as a team. Other monsters grouped together by chance, but lesser demons did so to fight collectively. Thus, adventurers often said they would rather face one half-beast than a group of lesser demons. In battle, with the lesser demons' coordinated attacks, many wounds appeared on Mika's body. But that wasn't the main issue. With Mika targeting them, the lesser demons seemed to realize his plan, dispersing and no longer clustering. They surrounded the half-beasts, coordinating with them in battle. Looks like it's going to be a tough fight. Mika took out a high-grade healing potion from his pouch, bit it open, and drank it, feeling the surge of energy within. Clang! Blocking an armored mouse's charge with his great sword, Mika still retreated a few steps. A strike with his left-hand sword on the armored mouse's body rebounded with force, surprising Mika slightly. What toughness! Even his full-strength strike didn't kill it. But Mika managed to cut through its armor. Pulling out his great sword, he finished off the fallen armored mouse, then looked around at the surrounding monsters, sighing. This is going nowhere. The monsters around him were still as numerous as before. Chapter 23 Breaking Limits, Mika's evolution in the heat of battle. Haha! With a swing of her spear, Ermid slew the little demon in front of her and then panted heavily from exhaustion. They just keep coming. Indeed, it seems the dungeon is determined to keep us here. Melly said quietly from beside her. At this moment, Ermid and Melly were positioned in the passage leading to the chamber where Mika was. From the other side of the passage, monsters continued to appear intermittently, trying to reach the chamber behind and join the monster feast. Originally, Ermid and Melly planned to wait here quietly for Mika, stepping in to help only if he couldn't manage on his own. But the sudden appearance of monsters disrupted their plan. Not wanting the situation on Mika's side to worsen, the two were intercepting the monsters trying to pass through. Roar! Controlling a half-beast to kill the approaching little demons, Melly said worriedly, although we can help intercept monsters here, we can't stop the ones on the other side. Does that mean the number of monsters Mika has to deal with will keep increasing? Exactly. Melly said helplessly, for now, Mika has to rely on himself. Ah! Running up the half-beast's club, Mika severed its head on its shoulder. Then he leaped to another spot, repeating this tactic to deal with the threats posed by the half-beasts. Through continuous slaughter, the number of little demons had noticeably decreased. But as time went on, Mika found it increasingly difficult. Slowly, he had almost no space left to maneuver. The monsters that had surrounded him on all sides had completely encircled him, merging into a single mass. In this situation, even if Mika used magic to clear an area, it would quickly be filled again. As the space for maneuvering shrank, the frequency of attacks on Mika increased. Clang! Although Mika noticed the attack from behind, he couldn't react in time and was instantly knocked flying. After being thrown back for only a fraction of a second in midair, Mika crashed into other half-beasts, forcing him to stop. Damn it! As soon as he hit the ground, Mika stood up and adopted a defensive stance. This was a conditioned reflex honed under the training of Urokodaki Sakonji. Spitting the blood from his mouth onto the ground, Mika calmly thought while fending off the attacks of nearby half-giants. Now, completely surrounded, Mika was constantly under attack from all directions. Although he could judge the attacks of monsters in his blind spots through hearing, his position was too narrow to dodge all the attacks simultaneously. Therefore, Mika had to choose to evade or resist the more powerful attacks of the half-beasts, while slowing down the attacks of other little demons. This made Mika battered and bruised but never defeated. In fact, he had killed even more monsters. But things rarely go as planned. With Mika targeting the little demons, the number of half-beasts around him began to increase. Because of the size of the half-beasts, the number of monsters around Mika decreased, reducing the frequency of attacks he faced. However, this increased the damage he took from attacks. He could endure several attacks from little demons, but a single blow from a half-beast would knock him flying. Feeling his internal organs shaking, blood kept dripping from Mika's mouth. No, if I take a few more hits like this, I'll definitely die. Feeling the state of his body, Mika's mind raced. I've been able to avoid the half-beast's attacks so far by predicting their attacks through my eyes and ears and seizing the intervals between their attacks. But now, with more half-beasts, even if I grasp their intervals, I can't dodge smoothly. This is the limit of what my body can do. Realizing this, Mika felt a heavy weight in his heart. As the space for maneuvering disappeared, Mika's swordsmanship, honed for 2 years, became ineffective. Now, Mika's fight with the monsters was reduced to the simplest attack and defense, evasion. He didn't worry about attacking. The monster corpses scattered across the grassland were his handiwork. His killing had never stopped. But defense was now his most important task. If he let the half-beasts attack, Mika would soon be beaten beyond recognition. To block the half-beasts' attacks, Mika had to endure almost all the attacks from the little demons. Now, there were hardly any unscathed parts on Mika's body, covered in scratches from the little demons. Without the high-grade healing potions he carried to stop the bleeding, Mika might have bled to death by now. But even so, Mika had no intention of giving up. Blocking an oncoming club with his great sword, Mika twisted his body and plunged forward, cutting off a half-beast's leg. He didn't have time to decapitate it before turning to fend off the attack from behind. My body's abilities are now at their limit. I need more reaction time. Defense and evasion. These were the most critical issues Mika faced. Facing attacks from all directions, deciding when to defend and when to dodge required careful planning. Otherwise, with just his agility and flexibility, he couldn't defend and dodge to this extent. From the moment he saw the monsters' attack intentions and trajectories to the moment their attacks fell, Mika had less than a second. In that time, he had to plan his defense and evasion in his mind and then execute it in reality. Mika had relied on this state to defend and dodge. But now, with more half-beasts, the time he needed to plan had increased, while the time he had to defend and dodge had decreased. This was the situation Mika faced now. So, I need to detect the half-beast's attack intentions and trajectories earlier to gain more time for defense and evasion. Stopping his attack, Mika focused all his energy on defense. Releasing all his senses, Mika used everything to perceive the world around him. The world he saw with his eyes. The sounds he heard with his ears. The airflow he felt on his skin. With these 3 senses, the world around Mika became clear. It was as if everything around him was imprinted in his mind. But this wasn't enough. Since the monster feast began, Mika's skill danger sense had been on alert. It felt like the entire dungeon's malice was enveloping him. But Mika didn't need to sense the dungeon's malice now. He needed to focus on the immediate surroundings. Under Mika's will, the danger sense ability began to contract, gradually shrinking to sense the attacks around Mika. Clang! Blocking a half-beast's attack with his sword and shield, Mika twisted his body to dodge the attack. With his 4-fold senses, Mika finally avoided this disaster. But he still wasn't satisfied. This defense and evasion came at the cost of his attacks. It was distorted. He needed to attack. Mika needs to attack. However, attacking would inevitably reduce the efficiency of his senses. So, Mika's sensory abilities needed to continue improving. How can I further enhance my sensory abilities? As he muttered to himself, Mika suddenly recalled the days of his training on Mount Narrow Mist. Back then, when facing various traps and mechanisms on the mountain, Mika, with his eyes closed, had continuously enhanced his hearing until those things could no longer harm him. Ah, it's the sense of crisis between life and death. Understanding the method, Mika's expression shifted from worry to calm and then to determination. After a moment of internal struggle, Mika made a decision. Clang! With the sound of clashing metal, Mika removed his blood-stained armor, which had protected him until now, leaving nothing on his body. Come on, let's see if you can kill me first, or if I can kill you all first. Mika shouted resolutely. Roar! 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 As if provoked by Mika's words, the surrounding monsters grew furious. They began to swing their weapons even more swiftly. Defense, defense, continuous defense. Dodge, dodge, constant dodging. The warnings of death continuously rang in Mika's mind, but he paid no heed. Now, he was using every means to see the world clearly. In his eyes, the surrounding images became increasingly clear, down to the pores on the monster's skin and the movement of their muscles. In his ears, the surrounding sounds grew more distinct, enabling him to differentiate between them with greater precision. He could even hear the sound of the monster's blood flowing. At the same time, through the sensation of air currents on his skin, Mika's perception of the shapes beyond his sight also became clearer. Under the skill danger sense, these three layers of perception were rapidly improving, elevating, and rushing towards an unknown direction. Clang! 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 As weapons clashed with staves, Mika's defense against attacks from all directions grew smoother. The four beastmen who had initially overwhelmed him could no longer harm him. Yet, Mika remained unsatisfied. Apart from defending against the beastmen's attacks, he also aimed to dodge the imps' assaults. Surrounded tightly by the monsters, Mika was not only dealing with 4 beastmen but also 5 imps attacking in coordination. By treating the imps' attacks as necessary to dodge, Mika's senses continued to evolve. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect defense. At that moment, no attack around Mika could harm him. Walking freely among the monsters, Mika saw all the reactions of the surrounding creatures. From the moment they intended to attack, Mika already knew how to counter them. From the moment of their birth, they were already on the path to death. Yet, Mika still wasn't satisfied. This was merely defense. How could victory be achieved with only defense? Mika needed to attack. Crossing his twin swords before him, his eyes were filled with cold indifference. At this moment, Mika's calmness was terrifying. He continually processed all the surrounding information. Nimbly dodging the swinging staves, Mika leapt along the arm of a beastman to its shoulder, decapitating it. His movements became more agile as he restarted his killing spree. The final slaughter began. Clang! As the attacks continued, Mika's previously perfect defense and dodging once again showed flaws. This was inevitable. Previously, Mika's flawless defense and dodging were achieved by sacrificing his attacks and focusing all his energy on defense. But now, restarting his attacks inevitably led to a dispersion of focus. Hence, flaws in his defensive and dodging system were normal. So, how could he compensate for this? Naturally, by continuing to evolve. Evolution, super evolution, ultimate evolution. Continual evolution until perfect defense and dodging were once again achieved. Quickly getting up from a knockdown state, Mika savored the thrill of dancing on the edge of death during the continuous slaughter. Knocked away again, Mika swiftly returned to the battlefield. His armorless body was now covered in blood from the staves, and he had no more advanced healing potions left. If I get hit by another staff, I probably won't be able to stand up again. Assessing his injuries, Mika silently concluded. But he showed no sign of worry, instead wearing a smile on his face. Yes, that's it. Only on the brink of life and death can I evolve faster. Now, let's see if you can kill me first or if I can evolve completely and counter-kill you. With a grim expression, Mika was utterly immersed in the thrill of battle, having discarded everything else. As Mika had anticipated, the crisis of death continuously stimulated his body, and the survival instinct from his very being pushed his body and senses to rapidly elevate and evolve. As the slaughter continued, Mika no longer received any direct attacks from the beastmen after that last blow. Although there were still occasional brushes and bumps, they could no longer deal a fatal blow to Mika. Yet, Mika's defense and dodging grew increasingly effortless. Gradually, the passage of time in Mika's eyes seemed to slow down, with the previously smooth operation of the world becoming increasingly jerky and severe. Simultaneously, as Mika's senses evolved to their peak, they began to retract and gradually shut down. However, this shutting down of senses did not weaken Mika's perceptive abilities but rather strengthened them. Everything around him reappeared vividly in Mika's mind. Moreover, all the images in Mika's perception seemed to turn transparent. The monsters surrounding Mika appeared transparent in his eyes. He could clearly see the flow of blood, the trembling of internal organs, and the exertion of muscles. Even the internal changes within Mika's own body were visible to him. This enhanced Mika's control over his body. The combat capabilities his body could exert took a quantum leap. This is the transparent world. Mika had been aware of his state since the beginning of the changes in his senses. This was the ultimate realm of martial arts from the world of Demon Slayer, the transparent world. It was a supreme domain only reached through relentless effort and endurance of pain. In this state, by focusing and shutting off unnecessary senses, the bodies of surrounding creatures appeared transparent. At the same time, Mika's movement speed, predictive capabilities, and evasion skills all saw significant improvements. In Mika's eyes, even the flow of blood vessels in his opponent's lungs was visible, and he could quickly grasp the contraction of his own muscles. Depending on his needs, he could freely turn off his fighting spirit, and due to accelerated perception, the enemy's actions appeared slowed down. Once, Yahweh had comprehended all the secrets of water breathing in an extremely short time and elevated it directly to this realm. And now, after 2.5 years of continuous training, relentless honing, and Yahweh's constant guidance, Mika finally, in this critical moment of life and death, comprehended its essence. He had reached this supreme realm. Chapter 25 Between Life and Death, at last LV2, Mika's Ascendancy. It looks like I'm the victor of this battle. Standing amidst the corpses of monsters on a blood-stained plain, Mika spoke softly. After awakening the transparent world, Mika no longer had any worries. In his eyes, the monsters' attacks were incredibly slow. Their intentions were so obvious that from the moment they thought of attacking, Mika already understood everything clearly. In this situation, no monster could touch Mika. With this assurance, Mika could fully commit to the slaughter and eliminate all the monsters present. Clang! As the battle ended, Mika could no longer hold his great sword and longsword. Even with continuous stamina recovery potions, the prolonged blood loss had exhausted Mika completely. Thud! Collapsing heavily to the ground, Mika panted heavily. In his exhausted state, he had fought solely by relying on the adrenaline rush from battle to maintain his condition. But as the fight concluded, the overwhelming fatigue hit him, making it impossible for Mika to stand up. Lying quietly on the blood-soaked grass, Mika gazed at the fog-covered ceiling and couldn't help but reflect, although I didn't encounter the young dragon, defeating the monster feast head-on is quite an achievement, isn't it? With this, I've earned the qualification to advance to LV.2 and officially become an high-class adventurer. In Orario, gods distinguish adventurers into high-class and lower level based on their rank. All adventurers who haven't advanced to LV.2 through great achievements are lower-level adventurers. Those who are LV.2 and above are high-class adventurers. Within this, LV.2 adventurers are classified as third-class adventurers. LV.3 and LV.4 adventurers are called second-class adventurers. LV.5 and LV.6 are known as first-class adventurers. To honor the adventurer's achievements, every adventurer who reaches LV.2 is given a title. In Orario, these titles are like a second name for adventurers. In the dungeon, unfamiliar adventurers often refer to each other by their titles. I wonder what my title will be. Shaking his head, Mika cast aside his random thoughts. After all, the choice of a title has nothing to do with the adventurer or their main god. The gods of Orario hold a sacred council periodically to discuss various matters, including assigning titles to newly advanced adventurers. These mischievous gods often choose extremely embarrassing or overly dramatic titles for adventurers, delighting in the reactions of the main gods. So Mika had no expectations regarding his title. Mika. Ermit and Meli's voices came from the foggy distance. Hearing these familiar voices, Mika smiled and shouted, "I'm here." Ermit, Melly, I won. Mika's triumphant shout echoed through the chamber. But before Ermit and Melly could respond, the ground beneath Mika began to shake violently. What's this? No way! Under Mika's astonished gaze, a young dragon emerged from the ground nearby and roared loudly. Roar! 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 Hey, 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 are you kidding me? When I was looking for you, you hid no matter what. Now that I don't want to see you, you pop out right next to me. Are you kidding me? Attracted by Mika's voice, the young dragon turned its gaze toward Mika, who was struggling to prop himself up. Mika knew this was the dungeon's finishing move. Damn you, dungeon! Mika cursed loudly. But then he regained his composure. I didn't want to do this, but you forced me. Straining to lift his head, Mika shouted loudly, Ermid! I'm coming, Mika! From the moment they heard Mika's response, Ermid and Melly had been running toward his voice. Now, hearing the young dragon's roar and Mika's shout, Ermid immediately stopped and began chanting. Drop of healing, tear of light, eternal sanctuary, summon the radiant hymn here. The melody of 365, the chronicle of healing will save all. Come forth, dispel evil. Heal wounds, banish sickness, curses sent to the other shore, deliver the holy mechanism of light. In the name of the gods heal through me. Dia Frater. In the nick of time, Ermid's magic enveloped Mika. Feeling strength surge within him, and seeing the young dragon's claw rapidly approaching, Mika immediately twisted his body, escaping the attack. Just as he escaped the dragon's claw strike, Mika quickly regained his stance, firmly gripping the great sword and long sword he had picked up. Without pausing, Mika climbed swiftly up the dragon's leg. Reaching the dragon's shoulder, Mika swung his sword at its neck. But the sound that returned was like the clash of metal. Mika's long sword only managed to cut through one layer of scales and couldn't go deeper. So hard! Roar! Feeling the pain from its shoulder, the young dragon quickly swung its claws, while its body began to shake violently. It wanted to throw Mika off. But that was impossible. Mika had an astonishing sense of balance. During his mountain training, to return to the endpoint quickly, no trap could hinder Mika's running. In this training, Mika had to adjust his balance constantly while dodging traps to maintain his speed. Compared to those traps, the shaking ground was nothing. Easily avoiding the dragon's claw, Mika quickly reached the front of the young dragon's head and stabbed his long sword into its eye. Roar! 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 Blinded in one eye, the young dragon's rage peaked. It howled in fury, swinging its claws even faster. Had it been before the monster feast, Mika wouldn't have been able to dodge this. But now, with the transparent world, Mika had already seen through the young dragon's intentions. With a leap, Mika jumped to the ground and moved to the dragon's foot. As everyone knows, young dragons have no wings, so their movement relies entirely on their legs. Burn, under the flame of my will. Fire once again engulfed Mika's sword, but this time, he didn't plan to use it to cut the dragon's leg. According to the information Mika received, young dragons have fire resistance. So Mika didn't use the flaming sword but a jet flame sword. With the flame's propulsion, Mika's sword accelerated to an incredible speed in a short time. Speed is power. A strike of immense speed severed the young dragon's leg. Lightly jumping back, Mika easily dodged the falling dragon. As the dragon fell in confusion, Mika quickly approached and retrieved his long sword from its eye. The great sword had broken into pieces during the previous jet flame strike. Standing on the young dragon's head, casually swinging his long sword, Mika smiled and said, "When there was a chance of victory, you didn't come out. Now, when it's a dead end, you appear. Is this to make me finish what I started?" Flames engulfed the sword's blade, burning brightly. "The victor is me, young dragon." With the declaration of victory, Mika swung the final blow. Thus, after 3 days of searching, Mika finally achieved greatness on the 12th floor. "Mika, you did it!" An excited voice came from behind. As Mika turned around, Ermid had already thrown herself into his arms, hugging his neck. Seeing this, Mika happily held Ermid under her arms and spun her around in circles. "Stop, put me down. I'm not a child anymore." Surprised by Mika's action, Ermid felt both sweet and embarrassed inside. What's wrong with that? Although Mika didn't mind, he still put Ermid down. As soon as she landed, Ermid shyly punched Mika twice. Seeing Mika and Ermid's playful interaction, Melly, although slightly envious, stood aside and said with a smile, "Congratulations, Mika. Our Yahweh familia finally has a high-level adventurer." Hearing Meli's voice, Mika turned back and grabbed her hand, pulling her over. He put his arms around both of their necks, pressing their heads together. "This is our collective achievement." The three of them huddled together, heads touching, looking down at the ground. Feeling each other's breaths, the hint of envy in Meli's heart disappeared. Yes, the three of them were a unit. "But aren't you forgetting Yahweh-sama?" Hearing Meli's teasing, Mika froze. He quickly released them, pretending nothing had happened. "Quick, while there's no one around, let's clean up the battlefield and head back." Seeing Mika's righteous expression, Ermid and Meli looked at each other and laughed. "Stop laughing, quickly forget what just happened, I don't want double training." "Ew, it's not that easy to forget. I'm begging you guys." Ha ha ha. At the Yahweh Familia base on West Street. The 4 members of the Yahweh Familia were gathered in the room of their main goddess, Yahweh, waiting anxiously. Yahweh was currently updating Mika's abilities. Although they believed Mika's previous experience should meet the criteria for a great feat, they were still nervous without Yahweh's confirmation. Usually, Ermid and Meli would avoid being in the room during Mika's updates, but now they were waiting quietly inside. "Done." Yahweh's sudden voice broke the heavy atmosphere in the room. Feeling the trio's gaze, Yahweh smiled and said, "The great feat required for leveling up has been met, you can level up anytime." She then took out a sheet of paper, printed Mika's updated abilities on it, and handed it to him, saying, "These are your current stats. Have a look, if you're satisfied, I'll level you up." Seeing the smile Yahweh couldn't hide, Mika curiously took the paper. Ermid and Meli also leaned in curiously. Name, Mika. Level, LV.1. Abilities, Strength, A899S923 Endurance, S994SS1031 Dexterity, S924S972 Agility, S912S943 Magic, A874S901. Magic, Heavenly Fire, Calamity. Skills, Danger Sense. All stats at S, and Endurance even broke the limit to reach SS. Are there any SS level stats in Orario? I've never heard of such a thing. And compared to last time, this increase is too much. As expected of you, Mika. Hearing Ermid and Meli's exclamations beside him, Mika smiled but wasn't as excited as they were. He had anticipated his rapid improvement in abilities. After all, to enhance his sensory abilities quickly, Mika had removed all his armor, putting himself on the brink of death. In that situation, as Mika expected, his sensory abilities improved rapidly. But that was just the surface improvement. It was well known that every time adventurers faced mortal threats, their abilities would significantly increase. Not to mention Mika, who repeatedly danced on the edge of life and death. In such circumstances, Mika's body and senses continuously evolved. One improvement was visible at the time. The other only became evident during ability updates. You seem calm, so you expected this improvement? Tell me more. Noticing Mika's expression, Yahweh, also curious about his rapid progress, asked with a smile. Ermid and Meli also looked over curiously. After all, while Mika fought, they were blocking monsters in the passage. The thick fog on the 12th floor made it hard for them to see Mika's actions. Seeing their curious gazes, Mika smiled and proudly recounted his experiences. After hearing his story, the three did not praise him but instead scolded him thoroughly. They couldn't accept Mika's reckless behavior of repeatedly risking his life. After all, adventuring was adventuring, not seeking death. I was wrong, I get it. Let's update the fauna and let me become LV.2. Seeing the situation turn bad, Mika quickly changed the topic. Giving Mika an annoyed glare, Yahweh sat behind him again and started the fauna enhancement. She understood that Mika wouldn't take her words to heart. That's just who he was. Mika never lacked the courage to face death. It seems he needs not only combat training but also guidance on his mindset. Life coaching. Shaking her head, Yahweh discarded her thoughts and focused on enhancing the fauna. Manipulating Mika's back with her fingers, Yahweh quickly reached a critical point. Mika, your development ability is out. Oh, it's time for the development ability update? What do I have? Mika asked curiously. Let me see, there's abnormal resistance, hunter, mystery. Stop, just mystery. Mika interrupted Yahweh's words, determined to obtain the mystery development ability. After all, it was considered the most desirable ability for adventurers. Mystery, hey? Indeed, with it, no one would choose any other ability. This means our Yahweh familia has a mystery holder. With a smug expression, Yahweh felt extremely pleased. Having an adventurer with the mystery ability greatly impacted their familia. Wow, Mika, you have another skill. Operating the fauna, Yahweh exclaimed in surprise. Another skill? Yes. Under Mika's surprised gaze, Yahweh printed his upgraded abilities on paper and handed it to him. Name, Mika. Level, LV.2. Abilities, Strength, I0 Endurance, I0 Dexterity, I0 Agility, I0 Magic, I0. Development Ability, Mystery I. Magic, Heavenly Fire, Calamity. Skills, Danger Sense Death Battle. Death Battle, hey. Recalling his previous adventures, Mika smiled. It suits me well. P.S. Consider reviewing and dropping some power stones. I would be very grateful and motivated. Chapter 26 New Skill, Dangerous New World, Hunter x Hunter. Death Battle. Combat abilities are unaffected by negative statuses. Combat abilities increase significantly with the severity of injuries. Where did this come from? It's like having battle continuation in Berserk. Looking at the new skill in front of him, Mika couldn't help but complain, though he was very satisfied with it. It suited his style perfectly. However, Ermid was clearly displeased. After all, this ability doesn't really complement my magic. It seems this new skill won't have many opportunities for use. Mika said with a playful smile as he looked at Ermid, after all, with you around, my injuries won't last, will they? Exactly. Ermid replied loudly. If Mika hadn't insisted on going alone this time, he wouldn't have gotten so seriously injured. I won't let this happen again. Ermid declared firmly. Seeing this, Mika, Yahweh, and Melly exchanged glances and silently agreed not to bring up the new skill death battle again. Melly, her eyes gleaming, quickly came up with a topic to shift the conversation. Clap. The sound of Melly's clapping drew everyone's attention. If I remember correctly, Mika completed his level up in just 11 months, didn't he? That breaks Loki Familia's Ace's record, making him the new record holder. Hearing Mika's achievement mentioned, Ermid's focus immediately shifted. If we only count the registration time, it would be just 4 months, wouldn't it? Ermid's eyes lit up. Well, it probably wouldn't only count registration time. Melly said quietly. Alright, but even if it's 11 months, that's still a new record. We should inform the guild right now. Wait. Mika immediately interrupted Ermid and Melly's conversation. As for informing the guild about my level up, that's off the table. I have a new order to announce. From today, our familia will hide our true levels until it's safe. What? Why? Ermid and Melly looked at Mika in shock. Their shock stemmed not only from the unexpected order but also from the fact that Mika announced it without discussing it with their goddess, Yahweh, beforehand. Though Yahweh quickly regained her composure, she had been clearly surprised by Mika's command. Mika knew he needed to explain to Ermid and Melly, but he first turned to Yahweh. About this order, I've been thinking about it for a while but haven't had the chance to discuss it with you, Goddess Yahweh. However, I believe you might have had similar thoughts. Yahweh nodded in acknowledgement. Seeing this, Mika turned to Ermid and Melly to explain, the reason is simple, it's too conspicuous. Let's set aside my 11-month record for now. Both of you are also close to reaching your limits, right? Once this information is revealed, it will undoubtedly shock all of Orario. If this were during the time of the Zeus Familia and Hera Familia, we wouldn't have to worry. But now, Orario is at its most dangerous. You mean the evil us? Melly quickly understood Mika's reasoning. Exactly. During a gathering with some old friends from the heavens, I learned about the current situation. Orario is undergoing a battle between good and evil. Familias wanting to destroy Orario are clashing in the shadows with those wanting to protect it. According to estimates, this conflict will culminate in a decisive battle in a year or two. Yahweh added, shaking her head. This is happening? We didn't know anything about it. Ermid and Melly found it hard to accept. Since it's still in the infiltration stage, only members of the major familias are aware. As time goes on, the situation will escalate, becoming known to all of Orario, leading to a final showdown. And in such a time, if those people learn about a familia full of rising stars, what do you think they will do? Mika, you mean they will try to wipe us out completely? Ermit exclaimed. Melly, having understood the situation earlier, fell into deep thought. Exactly. Until this war is over, we need to hide our true levels, gradually revealing some of our strength over time to make others believe we're ordinary. Only then can we grow safely. I see. Understanding the situation, Ermid and Melly grasped the seriousness of the matter. It's sad to think that Mika's genius reputation will remain unknown. Even if the evil us is defeated later, people won't recognize our achievements. To be a genius and not enjoy the recognition, it's really unfortunate. I'm no genius. Mika shook his head. You know better than anyone that with the time spent in the other world, it took me 2.5 years in total. That's not genius. But... Ermid tried to argue but was cut off by Mika covering her mouth. But you two are true geniuses. According to Mika's calculations, in another month and a half, Ermid and Melly would reach their limits. Adding this time, Ermid would have taken 1.5 years, while Melly would have taken just 11.5 months. They were the true top-tier geniuses. Yet, to avoid assassination by the evil us, they had to hide their talents. As Ermid said, it was truly unfortunate. Therefore, we must work hard and participate in the final battle against the evil us, to exact our revenge. But in just 1 or 2 years, how much can we grow? What if we're still only level 2 adventurers, unable to do anything but watch? Melly said sadly. Time? Hey, have you forgotten that time is something we have plenty of? Mika reminded them with a smile. Wait, Mika, have you discovered a new world again? Ermid, Melly and Yahweh exclaimed in unison. After fighting together for so long, Ermid and the others were well aware of Mika's special ability. So, when Mika mentioned it, they immediately understood his meaning. Yes, while upgrading my status, my consciousness once again reached that starry sky. The starry sky that dimmed after confirming one other world has brightened again. So, I can choose a new world. That's fantastic. Hearing Mika's confirmation, Ermid, Melly and Yahweh were overjoyed. Their curiosity about other worlds was immense. Since the cooldown period for the Devil Slayer world was 1.5 years, they couldn't visit it. Naturally, they were excited about the new world. Seeing their excitement, Mika couldn't help but shake his head. They're not the only ones curious, so am I. What will the new world be like? Once the decision to travel to another world was made, the 4 members of the Yahweh familia became quite busy. First, Mika needed to replenish his equipment. His great sword had completely shattered in the battle with the young dragon, with no possibility of repair. Thus, Mika had to buy a new great sword. Additionally, his armor needed replacement. During the previous monster feast, Mika had to withstand the attacks of demi-humans by taking on the blows from the imps, which left his armor in tatters. Although it could be repaired, the cost would be nearly the same as buying a new set. Considering Mika had leveled up and would face stronger monsters in the future, new equipment was necessary. Beyond the equipment and some potion supplies, the most essential items to prepare were gold and clothing. Since no one knew what kind of world Mika would travel to next, gold was universally valuable in most worlds. As for clothing, they needed various outfits to blend into different societies, which was a must for any seasoned traveler. Is everything ready? Ready. In response to Yahweh's inquiry, Mika, Ermid and Melly answered seriously. In Orario, there was a wide variety of clothing available, including modern-style attire. Thus, Mika and the others were dressed in modern-style clothes underneath their adventuring cloaks, with fully packed backpacks. This way, they could quickly adapt to any environment they found themselves in. If everything's ready, let's begin. Despite the smile on her face, Mika could see a hint of disappointment in Yahweh's eyes. He knew she wished to join them on their otherworldly journey. However, Mika couldn't bring anyone stronger than himself through the portal. I really wish I could bring Yahweh-sama along too. With this thought, Mika activated his ability. Darkness enveloped him, and the 3 found themselves in that starry sky once more. Looking at the brilliant stars, Mika reached out and touched the closest one. As his hand made contact, bright starlight engulfed them, and they vanished from the starry sky. In a dense forest, a male and 2 female adventurers suddenly appeared. A forest? No, it should be an island. Mika said uncertainly after sniffing the air. Unlike Mika, who immediately began assessing their surroundings, Ermid and Melly, experiencing their first otherworld journey, were excitedly taking in everything around them. So this is another world? It doesn't seem that different from ours, Melly remarked, a bit disappointed, as she looked around the dense forest. Ermit also turned to Mika, seeking his perspective. Don't worry. Whether it's similar to our world or not, we'll know once we find this world's human settlements. After reassuring them, Mika looked up at the sky. In this kind of situation, it's best to climb a tree and get a better view of the surroundings. With that, Mika leaped onto a branch and started climbing. Ermit and Melly followed his example. Given their physical prowess, climbing a tree was easy. Soon, they reached the top. That's the sea. Having never seen the sea before, Ermit and Melly couldn't help but exclaim in awe. Mika, having seen the sea in his past life through the internet, didn't focus on it for long. Instead, he quickly found what he was looking for. I see a city and a port. There are steel cargo ships docked there, so it seems the technology here is quite advanced. After some thought, Mika led his two sea-struck companions towards the city. Do you remember what I said before we came? Yes, even if we're curious about new things, we must pretend to know everything in the presence of others, Ermit quickly responded. Melly also nodded to show she hadn't forgotten. Good. Follow my lead from now on, understood? Understood. Seeing their determined expressions, Mika stopped giving further instructions. He knew both Ermit and Melly were not the reckless type. Their earlier lapse was just due to the initial excitement of the journey. Now, they were both ready. Let's begin the exploration of the new world. Emerging from the dense forest, Mika, Ermit, and Melly entered the town on the island. They had shed their adventuring cloaks and now wore modern-style clothes, blending in as they walked through the streets. From my previous experience, I'm likely to appear near the protagonist, and the timing of the travel is usually when the plot begins. But since I've only traveled once, these points are just references. Given that this is a modern society, there will definitely be a network, so we need phones, SIM cards, and most importantly, identity information. With this plan in mind, Mika's eyes sparkled. He had considered the steps to take if he arrived in a modern world. Confirming that their language was the same, he led Ermit and Melly through the back streets, obtaining a small amount of money and 3 identity documents using Melly's magic. After some inquiries, they went to the island's registry office and used Melly's magic again to alter the identity records. Once the documents were believable, they left the registry office. They then registered for SIM cards, bought phones, and connected to the network. You say these phones are very useful, but how do we operate them if we can't read the text? Melly asked Mika with a hint of frustration. They discovered at the registry office that, while their ability allowed them to understand the local language, they couldn't read it. Then learn it. If we could quickly learn the sacred language, this common language should be easy. Mika argued back. Melly and Ermit rolled their eyes at him. As Mika was about to further explain his reasoning, the three were drawn to the conversations at the nearby port. They really caught a giant fish. Last time was 20 years ago by Jin, right? His son is amazing too. With this, Mito can't refuse Gon becoming a hunter anymore. Standing among the crowd, looking at the massive fish and the young boy being praised, Mika felt both excited and worried. He realized where they were, the world of the classic anime Hunter x Hunter. His worry stemmed from the fact that this world had quite a dangerous level of power. P.S. Consider reviewing and dropping some power stones. I would be very grateful and motivated. Chapter 27 Into the Nin Realm, Mika's Hunter Exam Odyssey. Hunter x Hunter is a very old anime series for Mika. But even so, its excellent power system still feels extremely familiar to Mika. Nin ability, this is the power system of the Hunter x Hunter world. And to obtain this ability, the most orthodox way is to become one of the hunters. When Mika first started watching the anime, he didn't feel that Nin abilities were particularly powerful, just somewhat novel. But with the end of the Chimera Ant arc, the appearance of Killua's sibling, and Gon's father's revelation about the truth of this world, the danger of this world was fully revealed to Mika. This world is extremely dangerous. It might even be on par with the Danmachi world where gods don't directly intervene. Fortunately, as long as Mika doesn't actively seek out these dangers, they won't suddenly appear around them. Otherwise, Mika estimates that after learning Nin, he would quickly leave, only returning to explore after becoming powerful enough. Let's go. Glancing at Gon who was talking to his aunt, Mika led Ermit and Melly away from there. Next, they would go find a hotel to settle down temporarily. As for getting familiar with the protagonist Gon, Mika indicates that as long as the three of them want to pass the hunter exam to qualify for learning Nen, they will inevitably get to know him. After all, they will be fellow passengers on the same boat in the future. Hey, sign up for the hunter exam. That's right. In the hotel, after entering Ermit and Melly's room, Mika told them about their next action. Then, facing their confusion, Mika explained. Do you remember the boy who caught the large fish at the port today? Of course we remember. Melly said gravely, he's too amazing. Such a big fish, he could catch it all by himself. Before receiving God's blessing, even we couldn't do that. Exactly, from his exaggerated physical abilities, we can see that this world is not simple at all, Mika explained seriously. Based on my previous experiences, I think most worlds with special abilities can be temporarily divided into two types. One is like our world, where the existence of God's blessing can be known as long as you want to seek it out, an ability that exists openly. The other is like the world I went to last time, where the existence of demons and demon slayers is almost unknown to local residents, an ability hidden in the shadows. This world should belong to the type where abilities are hidden in the shadows, known only to relevant personnel. If so, this profession called hunter is quite suspicious. Millions of people participate every year, but on average only one person passes every 3 years. Looking at some related information translated by Mika, Melly, and Ermit also noticed the suspicious aspects of the hunter profession. Moreover, even that boy with extremely strong physical abilities wants to take the hunter exam. I think this is very valuable for reference. What do you think? Let's participate then. Melly said with a light laugh. After all, we know almost nothing about this world now. Since that's the case, it's better to find something to do than do nothing. And since it's your decision, Mika, I'll naturally follow it. That's right. Ermit said seriously. No matter what decision you make, Mika, we'll follow you. After all, you're our team leader. Ermit and Melly said in unison. Hearing their words, Mika was stunned. To hide his identity as a reincarnator, Mika naturally had to conceal the fact that he knew information about this world. For this, he had racked his brains to come up with this explanation. But he didn't expect to receive such a result. Feeling the full trust of the two, Mika felt a bitter taste in his heart. With Melly's wisdom, she should have noticed something, but out of trust, she didn't say anything. As for Ermit, she trusts unconditionally. Compared to their trust, I was thinking about how to deceive them. Shaking his head, realizing his mistake, Mika decided not to hide anything anymore. If that's the case, let's go find someone who can read tomorrow to help us register online for the exam. Without explaining further why he, who couldn't read, knew that the hunter exam needed online registration, Mika said directly. Then leave it to me. Seeing Mika return to his former decisiveness, a satisfied smile appeared on Melly's lips. After all, in her eyes, the decisive and impulsive Mika was the true hero in her heart. After completing the hunter exam registration online, the three of them began to wait. Of course, they wouldn't waste this waiting time. During the day, Mika would take Ermit and Melly to wander around various parts of the town, letting them experience the differences between life in different worlds. And help them quickly adapt to the customs and habits here. As for the night? That's of course for the hard work of learning to read and write. They didn't have to wait long before the ship designated by the Hunter Association arrived at Whale Island. Stepping onto this ship, feeling the constant swaying beneath their feet, the three quickly got used to it. After all, their sense of balance wasn't trained for nothing. Hey, kid, are you also going to take the hunter exam? You even brought girlfriends, that's hilarious. Ha ha ha. Looking at the three of them, the hunter exam participants who came out on deck to look at the scenery had contemptuous looks in their eyes. In their view, Mika and the others were just there for fun. After the mockery came the harassment. The loneliness brought by long sea voyages, coupled with Ermit and Melly's breathtaking beauty, caused some people on the ship to start harboring ill intentions. Among them, the most obvious was the most muscular man. Kid, if you let your girlfriend accompany me. Before he could finish speaking, Mika's figure had already disappeared from where he was standing. Instantly appearing behind the man, he directly pressed the man's head and smashed it into the ground. With a bang, the muscular man's head collided hard with the deck, the violent impact quickly attracting everyone's attention. Didn't your mother teach you that trouble comes from the mouth? Catching the dagger thrown by Ermid, repeatedly tapping the man's face with it, Mika warned in a cold voice despite his smile. "I'm sorry, sir, please forgive me." Feeling the bone-chilling killing intent emanating from Mika, the muscular man immediately cowered and started apologizing profusely. Seeing this, Mika had no intention of taking further action. Releasing his hand pressing the man down, Mika stood up again. Returning to Ermid and Meli's side, after returning the dagger to Ermid, Mika suddenly saw Gon below the ship. At this moment, he was saying goodbye to his fellow villagers from Whale Island. It's about to begin, the hunter exam. Smiling lightly and nodding, Mika led Ermid and Meli into the cabin, starting to prepare for the upcoming challenge. That storm coming from the sea. Boom! The sea was now shrouded in darkness, with fierce winds, pouring rain, flashing lightning, and rolling thunder. The power of nature was flaunting its majesty unrestrained. On the surging sea surface, the ship carrying Mika and his companions was resisting the turbulent ocean, advancing boldly across the waves. Ah! But sometimes the gap between people can be so vast. While the ship's crew were battling the storm at their posts, the hunter exam candidates in the cabin were wailing in agony. However, this was after all a ship carrying candidates heading to the hunter exam. Amidst the painful cries, there were still people who seemed unaffected, maintaining the same composure they had before the storm hit. A boy lying in a hammock, a young man leaning against the wall reading a book, and the young Gon who was helping out everywhere. Of course, Mika and his two companions were among these unaffected individuals. At this moment, Mika was leisurely lying on the floor, resting his head on Ermid's lap to conserve energy. As for Ermid and Meli, they were playing mobile games. Although they didn't understand much of this world's writing yet, some games could be enjoyed without recognizing the text. It seems there are quite a few noteworthy people in this hunter exam. After the weather returned to normal, the captain steering the ship came to the cabin carrying the hunter candidates and took in everything he saw. In his view, candidates who couldn't withstand this level of storm had already been eliminated. "You few, come with me." Hearing the captain's voice, Mika, who had been resting with his eyes closed, immediately opened them, then got up and led Ermid and Meli towards the captain's cabin. The other three, though somewhat confused, eventually followed as well. In the captain's cabin, the 6 of them introduced themselves one after another. Besides Mika's group of 3, the others were Gon freaks wearing green clothes and carrying a fishing rod, the androgynous blonde Kurapika, and Orario who looked like an adult. Then, the captain asked the 6 of them why they were taking the hunter exam. To this, Kurapika and Orario initially refused to answer. But soon, they gave in. The captain directly stated that they were already in the hunter exam now, and answering his questions was part of the test. If they were unwilling to answer, the 2 could give up on taking the exam. Left with no choice, the 2 had to state their reasons for taking the hunter exam one after another. Kurapika was for revenge, to kill the phantom troop who had massacred his clan. As for Orario, it was for money. Gon had already stated his reason before the captain revealed his identity, which was to see what kind of work could make his father abandon his family to pursue it. Money is good. As they say, money isn't everything, but without money, you can't do anything. Although people always say talking about money is vulgar, ironically what saves you is precisely this vulgar thing. Hearing Leorio's words, Mika couldn't help but sigh. He never underestimated the importance of money. After hearing Mika's sentiment, Leorio immediately took a liking to him. Mika's words had directly resonated with his heart. "Then what are the reasons for you 3 to take the hunter exam?" "Mika, Ermid, and Meli, right?" After learning the reasons of Gon and the others, the captain turned his gaze to Mika's group. "For us 3, we're together, and our reason for wanting to become hunters is the same, that is to obtain the ability exclusive to hunters, and then to take a good look at this colorful world." Standing in front of Ermid and Meli, Mika said seriously. "Ability exclusive to hunters." Hearing Mika's explanation, Kurapika's expression changed slightly. Obviously, in his eyes, Mika must know more about hunters, and it was something very important. "I see." The captain standing to the side also nodded slightly after hearing Mika's words. As a partner of the Hunter Association, he knew a bit about the abilities of hunters. That ability called Nin. After answering the captain's question, Mika stepped back, ready to watch the show between Kurapika and Leorio. Sure enough, the 2 with contrasting personalities eventually clashed, and then agreed to go to the deck to settle their differences. Mika and Gon also followed eagerly, wanting to watch from the sidelines. To understand a person, you need to understand what they dislike. I really like what Aunt Mito said. I think they must both have reasons to be angry at each other, so it's better if we don't stop them. Gon said seriously. That's right, at times like this, it's better to let them fight it out. Mika strongly agreed with Gon's thoughts. After all, isn't friendship between men often born from quarrels? When Mika led Ermit and Melly to the deck, the sky that had returned to calm once again turned black. Fierce winds and heavy rain once again swept across the sea area. And in such an environment, neither Kurapika nor Leorio showed any sign of being affected. They stared straight at each other and drew their weapons in succession. But just then, a mast on the ship was suddenly broken by the wind, and with the added force of the gale, it struck a crew member. Watch out! Mika, who had been watching Kurapika and Leorio, quickly shouted out after hearing the sound of wood breaking. But this didn't prevent the incident from happening. Struck by the wood, the crew member was immediately flung towards the outside of the ship. Melly. Rope. Got it. Hearing Mika's reminder, Melly immediately threw the rope on the ground to Mika. Seeing the crew member flying off the deck, everyone present rushed towards him. Watching Gon sprinting rapidly towards the crew member, Mika swung the rope in his hand, looping it around Gon. As Gon grabbed the feet of the crew member who was about to fall into the water, his own feet, also flying off the deck, were grabbed by Kurapika and Leorio. With Mika's rope added, Gon was now completely safe. Too reckless. If we hadn't grabbed your feet, you would have been lost at sea. But, you did grab them, didn't you? Looking at the three conversing in the corner, Mika called out with a smile, Hey, if you want to scold him, shouldn't you wait until we're back in the cabin? It's very dangerous out here right now. Hearing Mika's call, the three looked at each other and then returned to the cabin. After this joint effort, the relationship between Kurapika and Leorio also eased. Recognizing their mistakes, both apologized to each other. Thus, Mika, Gon, and the other four also became more familiar with each other. Of course, most importantly, the six of them gained the captain's approval, and he decided to personally take them to the nearest port. With this, the first stage of the hunter exam can be considered passed. Lying on Ermit's lap, Mika pondered silently. To learn an ability, the hunter exam wasn't the only path, but for now, it was the simplest one. Familiar with the plot, Mika knew clearly that this hunter exam, due to Chairman Netero's involvement, would become the exam with the highest number of admissions. With their abilities, as long as they participated in this exam step by step, they would surely pass. Mika had this confidence. Of course, this didn't mean that participating in the hunter exam would be without any danger. In this exam, there were still two extremely dangerous individuals. They were Hisoka from the Phantom Troop and Illumi Zaldik from the Assassin family. Both of them are very powerful non-users. P.S. Consider reviewing and dropping some power stones. I would be very grateful and motivated. Chapter 28 Exam begins, Underground Trials, New Friends. Wow, is this really Zaban City? Mika wondered aloud. Mika and his 5 companions walked along the bustling streets, following the transformed beast man known as the Kiriko. Gon, Ermit and Melly, equally inexperienced, wandered about excitedly, taking in the lively atmosphere and diverse shops. Mika could only sigh as he pulled out his wallet to cover their various expenses. Things are going smoothly, Mika remarked, stowing away the trinkets Ermit and Melly had purchased into his backpack. He gazed at the crowds around them, lost in thought. By this point, all 6 of them had qualified for the hunter exam. After disembarking from the ship, they had followed the captain's instructions to Gon, heading towards the massive cedar tree on the local mountain. Having passed both the trial of choices and the beast identification tests, the group had earned their right to participate in the actual hunter exam. Now, led by the human form Kiriko, they were making their way to the exam site. Of course, these were just appetizers. The real challenges are about to begin, Mika mused, recalling the 2 hidden bosses of this hunter exam, Hisoka from the Phantom Troop and Illumi Zaldik from the infamous Assassin family. Both were undoubtedly top-tier fighters in human society. Based on his memories and rough calculations, Mika had his own assessment of this world's power levels. The most legendary hunters in this world were probably comparable to level 6 adventurers in Orario. Top-class experts like the Aging Hunter Association Chairman Netero were likely equivalent to level 5. Most Phantom Troop members would be around level 4, while non-users who had developed their abilities corresponded to levels 2 or 3. Of course, Mika acknowledged that this was just a rough estimate for reference. Unlike the all-around enhancement of adventurers, non-users' strength depended on various factors: ability development, tactical use, combat experience, and information gathering. Their power assessment was comprehensive. Mika used the Chimera Ant King as a benchmark, considering him comparable to Orario's level 6 adventurers. This formed the basis of his evaluation. This gives me a general idea of where I stand, Mika thought, sensing the gap between himself and formidable opponents like Hisoka and Illumi. He decided it would be wise to avoid provoking them for now. "We've arrived," their guide announced from up ahead. Mika snapped out of his thoughts, as did Ermid, Meli, and Gon, who had been browsing nearby shops. They rejoined Kurapika and Leorio, who were gesturing towards a tall building. Mika, already aware that the building wasn't their actual destination, couldn't help but smile. Sure enough, when the guide pointed to a small shop next to the building, Kurapika and Leorio's expressions turned sheepish. Following the guide's coded exchange, the six were ushered into the back room of the small shop. "Looks like this year's exam site is underground," Mika commented casually, feeling the room descend. "No wonder we couldn't find it," Meli quipped. "Who would have thought the Hunter Association, with all their resources, would set up the entrance in such an ordinary little restaurant?" Kurapika and Leorio nodded in agreement, clearly sharing the desire to comment on the unexpected location. "By the way, Mika," Kurapika suddenly asked, "I remember you mentioning on the ship that you wanted to gain the abilities of a hunter. Could you elaborate on what kind of abilities those are?" "You mean Nen?" Mika replied directly, piquing everyone's curiosity. Nen is an ability only accessible to those who become hunters. It's a hidden power in this world, encompassing many aspects that are difficult to explain briefly, Mika continued. "However, Kurapika, I can say that for your goal, becoming a hunter is indeed the correct path to gaining the power you seek for revenge." "Are you saying the Phantom Troop members all use Nen?" Kurapika's pupils constricted. Mika nodded solemnly. A grin spread across Kurapika's face, though it was more of a grimace. "So that's your true nature, Phantom Troop." The killing intent radiating from Kurapika silenced everyone until their descending room came to a stop. "I'm sorry for dampening the mood," Kurapika apologized. "Don't worry about it," Gon reassured him with a smile. "You must have been through something terrible, Kurapika. We all understand." Kurapika paused, then managed a genuine smile. "The doors are opening," Mika announced as the wall-like doors began to slide apart. Beyond the doors lay a spacious underground passage, its far end obscured by a wall. Mika's group had arrived at the other end of this corridor. Hundreds of exam participants, alerted by their arrival, eyed them warily, already viewing them as competition. While Gon, Kurapika, and Leorio hesitated, overwhelmed by the atmosphere, Mika calmly stepped out with Ermid and Meli. "Here are your number badges," a diminutive staff member approached, handing them their tags. "Please wear them visibly and don't lose them." Curious about the bean-shaped person, Mika, Ermid, and Meli accepted their badges. Though they were familiar with demi-humans from the dungeon, with Meli herself having elven blood, they had never seen someone quite like this before. "Thank you," Mika said, examining his badge numbered 403. He recalled that in the original story, this had been Leorio's number. "I guess we got their numbers because we came out first," Mika thought, watching Leorio, Kurapika, and Gon receive badges 406, 407, and 408 respectively. Ermid and Meli had been given 404 and 405. "Meli, let's swap," Mika suggested, exchanging his 403 for her 405. In the original story, 405 had been Gon's number, and Gon had faced Hisoka in the second-to-last phase. "I hope that was just a coincidence," Mika thought to himself, fingering the badge. Surveying the crowd before them, Mika, Ermid, and Meli quietly retreated to a corner. "So these are the elite 100 or so selected from millions," Meli whispered, leaning against the wall beside Mika. "Just looking at them, you can sense various dangerous auras." Mika and Ermid nodded silently in agreement. In Mika's eyes, every candidate in this tunnel was undoubtedly an elite. Even with his physical abilities, he probably wouldn't rank in the top 10 among these people, let alone Ermid and Meli. The physical capabilities of people in this world are truly monstrous. Even the usually calm Ermid was shocked by the candidates' physiques. Typically, human physical abilities have limits. While residents of many worlds can enhance their bodies through special means, achieving extreme strength through mere training is nearly impossible. In Orario, even with the existence of gods, human physical limits remain normal. Further enhancement requires leveling up through divine blessing to expand the body's container and raise its upper limit. However, the people of this world seemed to defy reason when it came to physical limits. Among these normal, non-awakened elites, many had physical abilities comparable to level 2 adventurers. Mika knew that Killua, another protagonist among pro-hunters, possessed an arm strength of a terrifying 16 tons. Such strength in Orario might only be achievable by level 1 dwarf adventurers specializing in power. Here, the physical prowess Mika's group prided themselves on wasn't particularly impressive. "Mika, can we really pass this hunter selection?" Melly asked, her confidence wavering as she looked at the surrounding crowd. "Don't worry," Mika reassured her, patting her shoulder calmly. "We'll definitely pass." While Mika wouldn't have been so confident in other hunter exams, this particular one offered nearly 100% chance of becoming an official hunter if they played their cards right. The only caveat was avoiding confrontation with that man. Leaning against the wall, Mika's gaze kept returning to Hisoka in his clown attire. Perhaps sensing Mika's attention, Hisoka turned to look at him but quickly turned away, disappointed. He hadn't sensed the aura of a strong opponent from Mika. A lucky one. Hisoka muttered to himself. He had no time for weaklings unless they were part of a mission or deliberately provoked him. He was searching for the strong, or those with the potential for strength. Mika wasn't surprised by Hisoka's disinterest. He was currently in a state of N, making him appear as an ordinary passerby to others, his aura of strength hidden within. How perceptive, Mika thought, not bothered by Hisoka's attitude but impressed that Hisoka had noticed his gaze at all. In the end state, not only was Mika's fighting spirit concealed, but also other aspects of his presence, making him less noticeable, an excellent hiding ability. Yet Hisoka had still sensed his gaze. Mika's wariness of Hisoka intensified. While Mika was quietly observing Hisoka, Gon, Kurapika and Leorio encountered Tonpa, the rookie crusher. It was then that Hisoka's danger became apparent to everyone. A man who bumped into him had his arms turn into flower petals and disappear before everyone's eyes. This bizarre incident put almost everyone on alert against Hisoka. After briefly familiarizing himself with Gon, Kurapika and Leorio, Tonpa offered them juice. However, Gon's keen sense of taste thwarted Tonpa's laxative-laced drink. Subsequently, Ermit shared some of their own beverages with the trio. Mika's group's backpacks were filled with all sorts of peculiar items. As time passed, both Mika's group and Gon's fell silent, quietly observing their competitors and waiting for the examiner's appearance. Ding ding ding! With the sound of a bell, the massive wall blocking the candidate's path slowly rose. "Sorry to have kept you waiting. The registration period for the Hunter exam has now ended. We will now begin the Hunter exam," announced a middle-aged man with a handlebar mustache. His words excited the gathered candidates. The long-awaited Hunter exam was finally starting. "Final confirmation," the examiner continued. "This exam may result in severe injuries or even death if you are unlucky or lack ability. If you are still determined to participate, please follow me. Those who wish to withdraw, please exit via the elevator behind you." After hearing the explanation, none of the candidates wavered. Those who had made it this far were undoubtedly confident in themselves and wouldn't give up their hard-earned qualification over mere words. "Very well. The first phase will have 407 participants, everyone present." With that, he turned and began to move forward. Following the middle-aged man's pace, all the candidates started walking. However, this slow rhythm lasted only a short while before the examiner's pace quickened, forcing the candidates to start running to keep up. "What's going on?" Leorio asked, confused. "The front is speeding up," Kurapika explained loudly. As the pace stabilized, the man leading at the front began his self-introduction. "I forgot to mention, I'm Satos, the Phase 1 examiner. I'm now leading you to the site of Phase 2. "Phase 2? What about Phase 1? A small bald man running right behind Satos asked, puzzled. "Phase 1 has already begun. Following me to the Phase 2 site is the first phase of the exam." "Following you? Is that all we have to do?" the bald man inquired again, thinking it seemed too simple. "That's right. I cannot tell you where or when you must arrive. You need only follow me." After hearing the examiner's explanation, all the candidates understood the nature of the test. "I see. What a strange exam. I think this is testing our endurance. That's perfect. I'll follow to the end, no matter where we go. Compared to Orario, Kurapika was clearly thinking more deeply about the situation. A course without a visible goal will become psychologically more taxing. This is a test of not just endurance, but willpower as well, Kurapika thought to himself. Unlike Gon's group, who had pushed into the crowd as soon as the running started, Mika's trio stayed at the back of the pack. Maintain your breathing and pace. We only need to keep up with the back of the group, Mika advised. Understood. Ermit and Melly replied, determination evident on their faces. Mika glanced at them briefly. Compared to these stamina monsters, Mika, Ermit, and Melly were all weak in terms of endurance. Therefore, the trio decided to use some cheat methods, such as Ermit's magic or stamina recovery potions. After all, as unscrupulous outsiders, Mika had plenty of tricks up his sleeve to pass this exam. Don't forget to review. Chapter 29 Hisoka Challenge, Survival of the Fittest, Breathless Pursuit. Huff, huff, huff. Are the people of this world all monsters? Melly panted, bending over in exhaustion as she ran. 2 hours had passed since the first exam began, and all participants had already run 30 kilometers. Even Ermit and Melly, whose physical abilities were comparable to level 2 adventurers thanks to their breathing techniques, were feeling fatigued. Yet, some examinees ahead of them showed no signs of tiredness, as if running 30 kilometers in 2 hours was effortless. This gave Mika's group a clearer understanding of this world's inhabitants. It was evident that this world had no shortage of powerful individuals. If you're feeling tired, we can slow down a bit. As long as we don't stop completely, we have plenty of time, Mika said with a wry smile, running ahead of Ermit and Melly. Even he was feeling somewhat fatigued, but thanks to his beyond limit level endurance, he was confident he could make it to the end. If possible, let's slow down a bit more, Ermit suggested. All right, let's slow down. After deliberately reducing their speed, Mika's group was soon left behind by the tail end of the pack. But Mika wasn't concerned, the outcome of this test was far from decided. Once they were sure no one was nearby, Ermit began casting magic. According to Mika's plan, they would rely primarily on Ermit's magic for recovery in the early stages when no one could disturb them. Later, as more people dropped out along the way, they would switch to the safer option of using stamina recovery potions. As the trio continued running, they began to see more and more people stopping ahead of them. But this didn't affect Mika's group, they steadily pressed forward. As time passed, the distance covered by the participants grew longer. When Mika's group had run 80 kilometers, stairs appeared before them. The final battle is approaching, Mika thought, knowing this staircase would be their last stretch. No way, we have to climb 100 flights of stairs at the end. Melly exclaimed, clearly remembering their descent in the elevator earlier. I can't go on, Mika. You should go ahead, Melly said, looking at the seemingly endless stairs. Even if we manage to climb up, we'll probably be over the time limit. So you should go on without us. As long as you can learn that ability, we'll consider it a success, Melly added, knowing that if one of them learned this transferable ability, it would be enough. How could I possibly leave you behind? Mika said, taking off his backpack and handing it to Ermit. He then pulled Melly onto his back. Hold on tight. He instructed Melly before picking up Ermit in a princess carry. Get ready, I'm about to sprint. Hearing Mika's words, Ermit and Melly tightened their grip on him. As soon as Mika finished speaking, he dashed forward. Rapidly ascending the stairs, overtaking the slowly advancing examinees, Mika's figure gradually disappeared under their envious gazes. Mika, there's no need for you to do this. Melly continued to persuade him, despite the smile on her face. Although it would be romantic for all of us to become hunters together, isn't the main point now to gain the qualification to learn Nen? How could there be no need? Mika retorted. Both Ermit and Melly's participation was crucial. Before the hunter exam, Mika had considered letting them give up midway, thinking it would be more convenient to act alone. But he quickly abandoned this idea because of Hisoka's presence. Mika was worried about becoming Hisoka's target and was well aware of the power gap between them. That's why Melly's presence was necessary. With her dream control ability, Melly could potentially control Hisoka upon their first encounter, as she used mana rather than Nen. This could create a devastating first strike effect, giving Mika the opportunity to counterattack Hisoka. As for Ermit, if they were operating under the assumption of a confrontation with Hisoka, how could they not bring a healer? Without Ermid, Mika wouldn't dare use his ultimate techniques. So, both Ermid and Melly were even more important than they realized. I absolutely won't leave either of you behind, Mika shouted. Haven't Mika and the others arrived yet? The fog here is almost dispersing, Orario said anxiously, having waited at the finish line for a long time. Kurapika, sitting beside him, kept looking back. As companions who came together, they couldn't believe Mika's group would be eliminated in the first phase. They're here! Gon suddenly exclaimed while observing the tunnel. Soon, the sound of hurried footsteps came from the tunnel behind them. The next moment, a figure leapt out of the tunnel, arriving at the temporary finish line under the scrutinizing gazes of everyone present. Excellent! Safely arrived! Mika said with a smile, making eye contact with everyone looking at him. He gently set down Melly from his back and Ermid from his arms, then greeted Gon and the others. Looks like everyone made it through, hey. You're the one who's too slow. Orario retorted. What's the rush? It's just like a regular exam. As they say, 1.2 many is a waste, 1.2 few is a shame. As long as we arrive on time, it doesn't matter how we do it, right? Hearing Mika's explanation, Orario and Kurapika shook their heads helplessly. Gon and the boy next to him, however, found Mika's words interesting, and the three quickly gathered together. Killua, right? I'm Mika, Mika introduced himself after Gon's introduction. Before they could get to know each other better, an iron gate suddenly dropped behind them, blocking the path for any latecomers. This meant that anyone who hadn't reached this point was now eliminated. That was close. Melly, resting against the iron gate, sighed with relief. If they had been a bit slower, they might have been disqualified. Don't worry, everything was under my control, Mika reassured Melly and Ermid, though he didn't quite believe it himself. However, trusting Mika, Melly and Ermid immediately relaxed. At that moment, Hisoka threw his cards, killing a magical beast impersonating an examiner right before everyone's eyes. Earlier, as the iron gate dropped, Examiner Satos had introduced the next area they would traverse, the Numera wetlands. The wetlands were constantly shrouded in mist and inhabited by many magical beasts that would deceive and hunt the examinees. During Satos' introduction, another person suddenly appeared, claiming Satos was an imposter and that he was the real examiner, holding a monkey that looked similar to Satos. Faced with this dilemma, just as everyone was confused, Hisoka suddenly threw cards at both of them. If he couldn't solve the problem, he'd eliminate the source of the problem. Satos caught Hisoka's cards perfectly, while the imposter met an untimely death. How dangerous, this man! The level of danger Hisoka posed once again refreshed everyone's perception. After warning Hisoka not to attack the examiner again, Satos led everyone into the Numera wetlands. Thus, the second half of the first phase of the hunter exam began. Misty environment and magical beasts? We're familiar with this. Still at the back of the group, Mika, Ermid, and Melly ran leisurely through the fog-filled forest. As experienced adventurers who had fought in the lower levels of the dungeon for 2 or 3 months, the trio felt right at home in this environment. But with this thick fog, won't we get lost following behind the others? Melly asked, noticing a potential problem. Don't worry, I've memorized the sense of the experts in the group, so we won't lose track, Mika assured her. Mika's sensory training had sharpened not only his vision, hearing, and touch but also his sense of smell. Although not as exceptional as Tanjiro Kamato's, Mika's sense of smell was still far superior to that of an ordinary person. That's good. Melly and Ermid both felt reassured after Mika's explanation. They knew that in a test like this, in the fog-filled magical beast park, the most crucial thing was not to get lost. Once lost, it would be challenging to find the group again. So, as long as we don't get lost, even moving slower is fine, Mika stated confidently. However, things rarely went as planned. While effortlessly evading numerous magical creature traps and making steady progress, Mika and his companions suddenly encountered a troublesome figure, Hisoka from the Phantom Troop. In addition to Hisoka, the scene also included numerous corpses, Orario lying on the ground, and Gon being held by Hisoka. We stumbled upon this scene, hey. Mika muttered with a wry smile. Signaling to Ermid and Melly, Ermid moved to check Leorio's condition. No serious injuries, he's just unconscious, Ermid reported. Nodding slightly at the response, Mika drew the long sword from his back. Facing Hisoka, Mika knew he had to go all out. Put him down! Mika shouted at Hisoka, ready for battle. Oh? Just you? Hisoka taunted, seeing Mika as no different from other ordinary bystanders. But as Mika prepared to defend his friend, a glint of interest sparked in Hisoka's eyes. Although I never really wanted to fight you, I won't hold back if we do, Mika declared, fully aware that in the original storyline, Hisoka would soon release Gon and take Orario to the second phase of the test. Known for his gardener moniker, Hisoka would often let strong but undeveloped opponents grow before picking them when they were ripe. But that was in the storyline. Here, it was reality. Since his first world jump, Mika never considered these worlds fictional. Everything was real. Thus, Mika used the storyline for reference but never relied on it. Success depended on his own efforts. So, Mika genuinely made friends in these worlds. Now, with his friends in danger, Mika wouldn't stand by idly. Battle aura seeped from Mika's body, his eyes sharp with determination. So, put him down. Oh, this aura. Did I misjudge you? Hisoka, already excited, felt a surge of exhilaration sensing Mika's aura. Although Mika didn't exhibit signs of an unuser, the intensity of his aura surpassed that of Gon in Hisoka's grasp. This hunter exam is truly satisfying. Releasing his grip on Gon's throat, Hisoka flicked his wrist, sending 5 cards flying towards Mika. In a flurry of sword strikes, Mika deflected all 5 cards perfectly. Then, Mika launched his attack, charging towards Hisoka. Nice speed. Hisoka praised with a smile as Mika closed in. Although not physically superior to this world's inhabitants, Mika's speed was impressive. Mika's long sword slashed at Hisoka's neck, but Hisoka easily evaded the strike. However, the ensuing close combat quickly put Hisoka at a disadvantage. Mika adeptly dodged or blocked Hisoka's attacks, countering with precise strikes aimed at vital points. Hisoka found himself overwhelmed by Mika's fluid swordsmanship, feeling like he was being swept into a cold, dark ocean. In this frigid deep sea, a piercing gaze seemed to oversee his every move, leaving him no room to breathe. This swordsmanship. It's like a god of swords descended to the mortal world. Compared to this kid, Nobunaga's swordsmanship is nothing, Hisoka thought, thrilled by the intense, life-threatening combat. Experiencing the thrill of imminent death, Hisoka's excitement soared. Images of Nobunaga, another sword master from the Phantom Troop, flashed in Hisoka's mind. But Hisoka quickly dismissed them. Nobunaga was not on Mika's level. The only one comparable might be Netero. With this realization, Hisoka savored the fight. But soon, a feeling of regret surfaced within him. Why? Why isn't this kid an unuser? If he were, the fight would be even more exhilarating. As Hisoka's thoughts wandered, Mika was fully immersed in the battle. Facing Hisoka's threat, Mika fought with all his might for the first time since arriving in this world. Gradually, Mika sensed something awakening inside him, trying to emerge. In this heightened state, Mika's mind raced, recalling sword techniques and Yahweh's teachings. Mika's swordsmanship became increasingly refined and sharper. In this state, he grew rapidly. But this growth had a limit. Upon reaching a certain point, Mika's growth stalled, as if something was blocking him. Despite this, Mika had grown remarkably in a short time. After dodging Hisoka's attack, Mika maneuvered to Hisoka's side, his aura suddenly vanishing from the space. Hisoka's eyes widened as he realized he had lost track of Mika. Suddenly, a terrifying aura of Nen emanated from Hisoka as he instinctively dodged to the right. Despite his swift reaction, Mika's blade still grazed Hisoka's cheek, leaving a cut. Licking the blood from his wound, Hisoka's aura intensified. Blood. I almost died just now. Ha ha ha. Feeling the thrill of near death, Hisoka laughed maniacally, his body trembling. Seeing Mika standing resolute despite Hisoka's Nen, Hisoka thought, hold back. I must hold back. This apple isn't ripe yet. Hold back. After a deep, lingering look at Mika, Hisoka restrained his urge to fight and disappeared from their sight. If he stayed any longer, he wouldn't be able to control himself. Chapter 31 Cooking Challenge, A Hunter's Resolve, Path to Nen. Woo! Watching Hisoka's retreating figure, Mika exhaled deeply. Just moments ago, the malice and killing intent emanating from Hisoka was truly terrifying, making even Mika feel extremely uncomfortable. Is this Nen? Recalling that fear-inducing aura from before, Mika knew it was the power of Nen. Those who haven't awakened Nen are almost defenseless against Nen users, as the aura of Nen has a special suppressive effect on other living beings. It's fortunate Hisoka didn't fight to the end. If he had used Nen in battle, even if I had managed to win by luck, I probably would have missed this exam. Then I'd have to seek other methods to acquire Nen ability. Shaking his head in relief, Mika suddenly recalled the fight before Hisoka used Nen. Looking at his own arms and remembering his state back then, Mika gradually came to a conclusion. Could that have been Nen? Mika vaguely remembered that in the Chimera Ant arc, the human girl Komuji, who was loved by the Ant King, gradually awakened her Nen while playing Gunji with the king. In this world, it seemed that those who reached the pinnacle in certain skills could spontaneously awaken Nen abilities. I remember that Nen training itself is about cultivating the spirit and will. Those who continuously research and practice a certain skill are instinctively engaging in this kind of training. When their level surpasses a certain boundary, they might awaken Nen abilities. What about me? My level in the transparent world is itself a pinnacle of martial arts, but because I didn't train in this world, there's some discrepancy. But when I fight with all my might against others, this discrepancy gradually aligns, and eventually, I'll awaken Nen, right? So the feeling I had when fighting Hisoka earlier was the precursor to awakening Nen abilities. Having understood himself, Mika's face once again wore a smile. The state of being about to awaken Nen abilities lifted his spirits. Turning his head to look at Ermit and the others, Mika finally noticed their condition. Are you all okay? At this moment, apart from the unconscious Orario, whether it was Gon, Ermit, Meli or Kurapika who had arrived during Mika's battle, all four had uncomfortable expressions on their faces. It's nothing. Meli waved her hand, indicating she was fine. Ermit and Gon also nodded. Only Kurapika, who had arrived later, was now deep in thought. He was muttering to himself, so this is an unuser. Clearly, Hisoka's display of power had plunged him into thoughts of vengeance against the phantom troop. Patting his shoulder, Mika advised, don't think about it, Kurapika. Once you pass the hunter exam, you can also gain this ability. So, for now, let's focus on the hunter exam. That's right, we must pass the hunter exam. Hearing Mika's words, Kurapika immediately snapped back to reality. We're probably far behind the main group now. How can we find the direction to catch up? I can smell their scent. Gon said eagerly. Then let's move quickly. I'll carry Orario on my back. Are you all okay with your stamina? Don't worry. We won't fall behind. Smiling at Kurapika and Gon, Mika led Ermit and Meli in running ahead. Gon and Kurapika, carrying Orario, followed closely behind. After a long run, Mika, Ermit and Meli, who had fallen behind again, finally reached the venue for the second phase of the exam just before time ran out. As soon as they arrived, Mika felt a sharp gaze. Looking back, Mika's eyes met Hisoka's. Have I been targeted? Shaking his head, Mika no longer paid attention to Hisoka's gaze. After finding Gon and the others, the three of them went over to take a good rest. After all, judging by the speed of the three, the next test was likely to start soon. However, since the most difficult part for Mika and his companions was over, the upcoming tests were even less likely to eliminate them. Mika thought confidently. To all examinees, you've worked hard on the journey. This Viscon Forest Park is the venue for the second phase of the exam. I'll take my leave now. I wish you all good luck in passing. Before Mika and the others could catch their breath, the voice of the examiner Satos was heard. As he finished speaking and left, the gates of the forest park slowly opened. What then came into everyone's view was a beautiful girl with 5 spiky ponytails and an extremely fat man. Examinees who have successfully passed the first phase, please come in. The woman sitting in the middle said loudly, Welcome everyone, I am Menchi, the examiner for the second phase of the hunter exam. I am Examiner Boera, the extremely fat examiner introduced himself. Menchi and Boera? I remember this phase is supposed to test cooking, right? Recalling the plot he had seen before, Mika's lips curled into a slight smile. Almost everyone participating in the hunter exam had trained their bodies thoroughly. Although the world doesn't lack people talented in both martial arts and academics, asking these people to cook was almost impossible. Sure enough, as soon as Menchi announced that the next test would be cooking, the crowd erupted into an uproar. This commotion gradually turned into laughter as Menchi referred to herself as a gourmet hunter. However, even if they looked down on gourmet hunters, they still had to follow the examiner's orders. After Boera announced that the next test required them to make a pork dish using pigs from the forest, everyone quickly ran outside. These pigs are really big. In the forest, looking at the wild pigs that were about as tall as a person, Mika couldn't help but marvel. I wonder if the meat from these pigs tastes good. It should taste better than ordinary pork, after all, those two examiners are so-called gourmet hunters. The ingredients they require should be better than ordinary pork. I see, then what dish do you think we should make? Pork chops. Is that too ordinary to pass? Listening to Ermit and Melly's discussion beside him, Mika suddenly froze. Although almost no one here could cook, Ermit and Melly could. In fact, because they were responsible for the Coral clan's meals and had been taught by Yahweh, the two were master-level chefs in this area. So the question arose. If they passed, would there need to be a retest? If there wasn't a retest, wouldn't Hisoka and Illumi be eliminated? Wouldn't they go on a killing spree at the venue then? If they killed the examiners, would Netero, who was nearby, take them out? Imagining the scene of Hisoka being eliminated or killed, Mika's lips couldn't help but curl up. But he quickly returned to normal. A retest is still more likely. Besides the small number of people, it's more because Menchi was intimidated by Hisoka's killing intent, and because of everyone's mockery towards gourmet hunters, she deliberately raised the passing threshold. But it doesn't hurt to try. Turning around to face Ermit and Melly, Mika said with a smile, "It's all up to you two now. Leave it to us." Ermit and Melly said confidently. Dash. After finding the pigs Boera mentioned, everyone present felt stumped. There was no other way, these pigs were truly difficult to control. But soon, Gon accidentally discovered these pigs' weakness, their foreheads. Because of this, almost everyone completed the challenge of hunting wild pigs, quickly returning to the venue holding their catches high. Looking around, it seems everyone's just roasting whole pigs? Don't tell me you're not even going to process the internal organs. Watching the examinees who started roasting pigs right away, Mika couldn't help but rub his forehead. With their attitude, it's no wonder Menchi would get angry. Anyone faced with this scene couldn't remain calm. Shaking his head, Mika began to process the pork in front of him. Although Mika himself knew how to cook, his skill level probably wouldn't pass Menchi's standards. Even so, Mika would seriously complete the task at hand. Doing one's best to perfect the task at hand was Mika's belief. Fail. 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 Hearing the constant judgments around him, Mika remained unmoved. At this moment, he was concentrating on completing his own dish. Done. Because of Ermid, the super chef at home, Mika's cooking skills were actually limited to just a few dishes. What he was making now was the pork chop that Ermit and Melly had earlier said was too ordinary. In cooking pork chops, the most important aspect is controlling the heat. As someone who could manipulate fire magic, Mika's control over heat was extremely advanced. This was the only culinary skill where he could match or even surpass Ermit and Melly. Please taste. Mika had specially prepared 2 plates. Menchi's portion was moderate, while Boera's was piled high. After all, the two had different judging criteria. Boera was concerned with quantity, while Menchi focused on quality. Finally, a refreshing dish. Looking at Mika's pork chops, as an experienced gourmet hunter, Menchi could tell the quality of the dish at a glance. Because of this, for the first time since the exam began, Menchi picked up her utensils, cut a small piece of the pork chop, and put it in her mouth. Delicious. What perfect control of heat. Tasting Mika's dish, Menchi's eyes suddenly lit up. Although Mika's other cooking techniques weren't up to par, his control over heat perfectly captured Menchi's taste buds. You pass. Menchi announced with a smile. Hearing Menchi's voice, the crowd suddenly erupted into chatter. After all, Mika was the first person to pass the second phase of the test. Such perfect control over heat. Young man, if you pass the hunter exam, would you like to join us gourmet hunters? Hearing Menchi's recruitment, Mika waved his hand in refusal. My ambitions don't lie in the culinary world. I can tell. If you had interest in this field, your skills in other aspects wouldn't be so poor. Seeing that Menchi had given up on recruiting him, Mika returned to his cooking station with a grin. As soon as he returned, he received pleading looks from Gon and the other 3. To this, Mika could only spread his hands and say, I can't help either. I passed because of my talent in controlling heat. I don't have any technical knowledge to guide you. The 4 could only shake their heads helplessly. After all, they had heard Menchi's comments on Mika's dish earlier. Mika's dish indeed had no merits other than heat control. And heat control isn't something that can be improved in a short time. But their disappointment didn't last long. Soon, Ermit and Melly passed the test one after another. Compared to Mika, they were the true culinary experts. After all, in Orario, there were all kinds of deities. Although they had sealed their divine powers, they were still unparalleled in their areas of expertise. Therefore, thanks to them, Orario's level in various skills far surpassed that of other worlds. And culinary skills were no exception. Watching the scene of Gon and the others surrounding Ermit and Melly with questions after they returned from passing the test, Mika sat leisurely under a tree shade, leaning against the trunk, enjoying the scene at the venue. Waiting for the upcoming show. Sure enough, after Mika and his two companions, no one else passed. This made the other examinees particularly dissatisfied. They remembered Mika and his companions vividly. In the previous test, the three of them had always arrived last. Yet these low-level performers had passed a test that they couldn't. How could this be convincing? Thus, the atmosphere at the venue became tense. Just as the scene was about to erupt into chaos, Chairman Netero suddenly descended from the sky, landing in the middle of the venue. Menchi, was there really no personal bias in this exam? Faced with Netero's inquiry, Menchi admitted on the spot that she had raised the passing threshold on her own due to the examinees' disrespect towards gourmet hunters. So, the second phase of the test welcomed a retest. However, this had nothing to do with Mika and his two companions. Given that they had passed even with Menchi's raised standards, the three excellent performers didn't need to retake the test. So, Mika and his companions could relax and watch others take the next test. However, when they learned that the retest involved obtaining rare and delicious eggs, Ermit and Melly ran off to participate, bringing back 4 eggs. As for the extra 2, one was naturally for Mika, and the other was for Goddess Yahweh. This is really delicious. Tasting the egg dishes made by Ermit and Melly, Mika's face showed satisfaction. As expected of a world with the profession of gourmet hunters, the rare ingredients here were truly delicious. After the retest, the remaining examinees boarded Chairman Netero's airship, heading towards the location of the third phase of the test. Tomorrow is the third phase of the test. I wonder what kind of challenge it will be this time. Melly's face showed an expectant expression. Evidently, she had grown to like the feeling of constantly facing challenges. Ermit, standing beside her, nodded in agreement. No matter what tomorrow's challenge is, you two should go and rest well now. What about you? Melly immediately caught the meaning in Mika's words. Clearly, Mika had no intention of resting. Me? I plan to go have a chat with someone. A chat? Is it dangerous? Recalling Mika's earlier battle with Hisoka, Ermit's face showed a worried expression. Both she and Melly could see that Hisoka had definitely held back at that time. The opponent hadn't used the ability called Nin. Don't worry, I'm not going to find those troublesome guys. You two just rest well. With that, Mika waved to the two and walked towards the other end of the corridor. Where is he? Moving along the corridor, Mika kept searching for traces of a certain person. But this airship was truly large, and he hadn't seen the person's figure yet. Bang! After turning a corner, a collision sound suddenly reached Mika's ears. Found it! Walking towards the source of the collision sound, Mika soon arrived at the place where the sound came from. This should be the place where Hunter Association Chairman Netero was playing with Gon and Killua. And Netero was precisely the person Mika wanted to find. Chapter 32 Netero vs Mika, Unlocking Nin, Test of Strength. Netero, the chairman of the Hunter Association, carries the title of the world's strongest man. Mika had previously categorized the strong individuals of this world based on his understanding. At that time, he placed Netero at the LV.5 position. Above him was still LV.6. This wasn't to say that Netero wasn't strong, but rather that he was simply too old. What is Nin? Nin is the ability to manipulate life energy. It's the power to freely control the life energy, aura, emitted from within the body, using it for attack or defense. The foundation of Nin is life energy. Therefore, as Nin users grow older, their Nin gradually declines. Netero is already 120 years old now. Even if his body is still robust, his life energy has long since fallen to its lowest point. He was once invincible for a century. Now, in his old age, he's still one of the top existences in the hunter world, but he can no longer return to his former peak. That's why Mika placed him at the LV.5 position. The reason Mika came to find him was for Mika's own sake. In his battle with Hisoka, Mika felt his own nin and was on the verge of awakening it, just one step away. But it was this final step that Mika couldn't seem to take. After recalling relevant plot points, Mika suddenly thought of a possibility. In the Chimera Ant arc, before being captured by the Ant King, Komuji had already been the undefeated champion of East Gorto Republic for several consecutive terms. Yet even so, she hadn't awakened her nin. But during her game with the Ant King, she achieved awakening. Why was this? Mika thought it was because of the Ant King, an evenly matched opponent. The Ant King, with his powerful learning ability, could master and perfect any skill in a very short time. Before Komuji, many other champion-level players of various board games had been quickly surpassed and killed by him. But this learning ability failed when he encountered Komuji. No matter how hard the Ant King tried, he ultimately couldn't surpass Komuji, and instead pushed her to a higher realm. Therefore, Mika felt he now needed to fight against a top-tier martial arts expert. This would stimulate his own state. There happened to be such a person nearby, the once strongest martial artist, Netero. I won't play this game with no chance of winning. Just as Mika arrived at the door of Netero's room, Killua's voice reached his ears. Then, the tightly closed door opened. Killua walked out with an annoyed expression. Are you leaving, Killua? Oh, it's you, Mika. Seeing Mika, Killua, though a bit surprised, explained to him, there's an old man inside who doesn't act his age, always thinking of weird ways to trick us kids. It's really irritating. Who's not acting their age? Netero shouted loudly. But Killua didn't pay him any attention at all, just saying goodbye to Mika, so I'm going back, to avoid being tricked by him again. With that, he waved his hand and walked towards the other side of the corridor. Looking at Killua's retreating figure, Mika shook his head and walked into the room. Inside the room, Gon was constantly rushing towards the ball in Netero's hand, trying to snatch it. How about it, little boy? Do you want to play too? Netero, excited by Gon's enthusiasm, invited Mika. Hearing Netero's invitation, anger immediately surged in Mika's heart. Who are you calling a little boy? After going through the trials in the Demon Slayer world and Danmachi world, Mika was now almost 15 years old. At this age, how could he accept Netero calling him a little boy? However, after shouting once, Mika didn't join Netero and Gon's game. He quietly sat by the wall, observing their game. I'll play, but after Gon finishes. It's his game time now. I see. Looking at Mika's silent expression, Netero's smile diminished slightly. Although he couldn't sense any aura from Mika, Netero's century-old martial arts instinct told him that there was a sharp feeling about this young man before him. This was the feeling of a top-tier swordsman. So young. Just as Netero was focusing on Mika, Gon suddenly took the chance to lunge for the volleyball in his hand. Caught off guard for a moment, Netero almost lost the ball. Although he didn't let Gon snatch it away, he ended up using both hands. Even when facing both Gon and Killua simultaneously, he had only used one hand and one foot. It was precisely because he noticed this that Killua gave up continuing to play with Netero. You used both hands, right? That means I won. After Killua pointed out Netero's holding back, Gon didn't give up. Instead, he set making Netero use his other hand as his goal. After achieving his goal and excitedly shouting for a while, he quickly fell asleep. This kid. Netero shook his head with a smile and used the room's phone to instruct the airship's pilot to fly slower. After finishing the call, he turned to look at Mika. So, I suppose it's your turn now. Naturally. Slowly standing up, Mika took out a wooden sword from behind him and swung his arm. This wooden sword was carved by him from the trees in the forest of the second test, shaped to fit his hand perfectly. As his body gradually heated up, Mika's eyes changed, and his own aura burst forth from within him. This was a warrior's fighting spirit. I never expected to encounter such a young sword saint. Feeling Mika's fighting spirit, Netero's smile couldn't be contained. As a top-tier martial artist who had been unrivaled in the martial arts world for decades, Netero had been yearning for an opponent for many years. Praying for martial arts, praying for life, and craving for opponents. This was his everything. The next moment, a terrifying aura erupted from within Netero, instantly filling the entire room. This terrifying aura wasn't Netero's nin. It was his fighting spirit. That fighting spirit filled with an invincible belief. Under the pressure of this fighting spirit, Mika's own aura was like a small boat rocking in a violent storm at sea. That almost crushing presence made Mika feel like he could barely breathe. So this is the fighting spirit of Netero, the man who has been invincible for decades. Feeling the pressure of this fighting spirit, the energy within Mika also became active, beginning to circulate continuously inside his body. This was a pure clash of fighting spirits. People unfamiliar with martial arts might not feel anything when facing Netero like this. But the further one had progressed in martial arts, the more intense this pressure would feel. In this state, even swinging his sword was extremely difficult for Mika. However, Mika had anticipated this. Having felt a similar sensation from Yahweh before, Mika was prepared. Moreover, this feeling still fell far short of Yahweh's pressure. Recalling his original intention, reorganizing his beliefs, gathering all his strength, since he couldn't contend with Netero's fighting spirit externally, he would shift the battlefield. A scorching sensation flowed through Mika's body. Immense energy accumulated within Mika, then flowed through his arm into his sword. Gathering all his power internally to drive his body, Mika's foot stomped heavily on the ground. He moved slowly yet swiftly towards Netero's location. He swung his sword towards Netero's head, a strike that concentrated all of his power. As this strike was delivered, the energy accumulated in Mika's body instantly erupted, breaking through its limits. At the moment this attack was launched, Mika fully awakened. He became an user. Chapter 33 Mika's Rapid Mastery, Nen Principles and Training. Haha! Have you awakened? Netero laughed as he easily dodged Mika's sword, ceasing his aura's pressure. He gazed at Mika, whose body was constantly emitting a milky white gas. Although Mika had now reached the same level as him, Netero's invincible spirit, accumulated over decades, was no joke. At this moment, Mika was still no match for him. But Mika's potential fascinated Netero. As an old man who had been invincible for decades, what Netero now craved was an opponent worthy of battle. And now, Mika had clearly entered the list of those he considered worthy opponents. Such limitless potential. Is this Nen? Feeling his new state, Mika looked at his palm and muttered to himself excitedly. He wasn't concerned at all about Netero dodging his attack. After all, it was Netero, that strike, although powerful, wasn't fast. Moreover, more than whether the sword strike had landed, Mika was more concerned about his own condition. Now, he was enveloped in a milky white gas. It's as if I'm immersed in warm mucus, wearing a weightless garment. Feeling the finally awakened Nen, Mika was in high spirits. This meant that the most important task since his arrival in this world was completed. Next, he needed to quickly master the knowledge related to Nen abilities and then teach it to the other members of the Yahweh Familia. But now's not the time to think about those things. Sensing the life energy constantly flowing out of his body, Mika knew he needed to quickly master it, or he would soon collapse from exhaustion. To control this energy, Mika had to master 10, one of the 4 major principles of Nen. As the ability system of the Hunter world, Nen's foundation is known as the 4 major principles. They are called Ten, Zetsu, Ren, and Hatsu. Among them, Ten is a technique that keeps aura around the body. Through this method, the body becomes stronger and may even retain youth. Zetsu is a technique that completely stops the outflow of aura. It has the effect of erasing one's presence and eliminating fatigue. Ren is a technique that strengthens and increases the aura that is output. Hatsu is a technique that freely manipulates and uses the aura enhanced by Ren. It is the culmination of Nen abilities. Now, what Mika needed was the ability of Ten. To use it to constrain the life energy constantly overflowing from his body, letting the aura stay on the surface of his body. Relax. Relaxing his body, Mika used his will to control this life energy. As he slowly experimented with manipulating this life energy, Mika suddenly recalled the mana manipulation technique that Meli had taught him. Under the guidance of Riveria in the Loki Familia, Meli had rapidly improved her knowledge of magic, including mana manipulation techniques. She had also taught these techniques to Mika. After all, Mika's magic was truly wide area annihilation magic. Learning some mana manipulation techniques could only benefit him. And now, the mana manipulation techniques he had learned before brought him great help in mastering Nen abilities. Using mana manipulation techniques as a reference, Mika very quickly mastered the ability of Ten. Manipulating the aura to stay around his body, Mika's powerful sense of touch clearly perceived that this Nen aura was nourishing his body. To have completed 10 without any guidance. This child's talent is truly unfathomable. The more Netero understood Mika's talent, the more he looked forward to seeing him grow up. Wait, is he? Watching Mika's aura gradually disappear, the smile on Netero's face grew even brighter. Not only 10, but he's also mastered Zetsu on his own. Tightly closing all his aura nodes, shutting all the aura inside his body, contracting and isolating all his aura and aura atmosphere, making his presence faint. This was the state Mika was in now. After mastering 10, Mika curiously experimented with the other 3 major principles. Among these 3, Zetsu was the first Mika tried. After all, his own realm transparent world had an effect similar to Zetsu. Sure enough, after recalling the principle of Zetsu, Mika quickly completed mastering Zetsu. At this moment, he was in the state of Zetsu. After completing the training of Zetsu, Mika turned his attention to Ren. As a technique for enhancing aura, the importance of Ren is undeniable. I remember Ren is about releasing more aura than usual by emitting the cultivated aura from all aura nodes at once, right? Recalling the principle of Ren, still referring to mana manipulation techniques, Mika quickly figured out how to use Ren. As a large amount of aura spurted out from his body, Mika could clearly feel that in this state, all aspects of his attributes had been greatly improved. Is this Ren? Feeling his state, Mika's face was full of smiles. Just then, Netero's voice suddenly rang out. All right, that's enough. Stopping Mika's desire to continue exploring, Netero said seriously, you must have understood some information about Nen before, otherwise you wouldn't have mastered 10, Zetsu, and Ren, these 3 major principles, so easily. Although you were able to awaken and figure out these 3 major principles on your own without anyone teaching you, this is ultimately not the orthodox method. Now you need someone to give you the most orthodox teaching. Are you willing to teach me Nen? Mika looked at Netero seriously and said. Just as Netero said, Mika's ability to master these 3 major principles so smoothly relied on mana manipulation techniques and the insights brought by transparent world. This method of drawing inferences from other cases must have differences from the orthodox method. These differences might bring huge troubles to Mika in the future. Although according to the association's requirements, we would only teach you Nen abilities after you become hunters and pass the test. But with your current awakened state, passing the hunter test is almost certain, and the test after that would be even less of a problem for you. Since that's the case, now that you've awakened, there shouldn't be any problem with me teaching you Nen abilities. Hearing Netero's self-talk, Mika immediately bowed and shouted, please teach me Nen abilities, Chairman Netero. Very well, it's decided then. Looking at this uncut jade, Netero finally made a decision, he would personally cultivate this child. The next day, after a night's rest, Ermit and Meli, who happened to meet Killua, Kurapika and Leorio in the passage after waking up, walked towards the dining hall together. When they arrived at the dining hall, they saw Mika and Gon eating heartily. Gon, why are you here? Didn't you go back last night? Killua asked curiously. Yeah, after you left yesterday, it took me a long time to make that old man use his other hand, then I fell asleep. Mika just woke me up. I see. Listening to the conversation between Gon and Killua beside his ears, Mika winked at Ermit and Meli. Among the people present, no one knew that Mika had already undergone a complete transformation compared to yesterday. Today, he was already an user. Is this the location for the 3rd test? Standing on top of this cylindrical flat-topped tower, Mika stepped on the ground beneath his feet and said with a light chuckle. Now that he had awakened and received guidance from Netero, Mika didn't value the hunter status as much as before. However, for Netero to legitimately teach him Nen abilities, Mika still needed to obtain the hunter status. At the same time, other examinees standing on the tower top were also studying the ground, pondering what kind of test would come next. Just then, the bean-shaped man who called himself Bean conveyed the rules for the 3rd test to everyone. Examinees, this is the top of the tower known as Trick Tower. Your task is to reach the ground alive within 72 hours. Now then, good luck everyone. With that said, Bean turned and boarded the airship, leaving the place along with it. Trick Tower, hey. With his hands in his pockets, Mika paced back and forth along the tower top, searching for an entrance leading downwards. Having seen the original work, Mika knew clearly that the correct way to clear this tower was to find an entrance into the tower, then pass through various traps and mechanisms to finally reach the ground. What Mika was looking for now was a passage suitable for 3 people to enter together. Based on Gon and the others' experiences in the original work, it could be seen that several nearby passages might connect to the same path. That was a multi-person passage different from other single-person passages. Apart from those 3 brothers just now, are there no other three-person passages? After searching all the passages, Mika found that except for the three brothers who had found a three-person passage before him due to luck, there were no more three-person passages. That's right, after all, this is a place to test hunters' abilities. It's normal to have fewer tests on teamwork and such. If that's the case, then we can only use the backup plan. After determining the next course of action, Mika led Ermid and Melly to a certain passage. Ermid, you go in from here. Below should be gone and the other three. Follow their actions, and remember not to be reckless when encountering problems. I understand. Ermid naturally trusted Mika's words completely. She took a light step forward, and her figure instantly disappeared from Mika and Melly's sight. Turning his head to look at Melly beside him, Mika said seriously, with this, the two of us will have to act independently. The correct choice. Although our close combat abilities are about the same, compared to Ermid who's a healer, my independent action ability is a bit stronger. Melly understood Mika's thoughts perfectly. In the previous tests, because of Mika's leadership, Melly didn't need to think about anything. Now being able to face the hunter test alone was exactly what she desired. She didn't want to rely entirely on Mika's support along the way, as that didn't align with her original intentions. Don't worry, I'll definitely pass. I've always believed in you. The two looked at each other, smiled, and then stepped into the entrance simultaneously. Their figures instantly disappeared from the tower top. With this, the third phase of the hunter exam officially began. Trick Tower, as the name suggests, it's a tower full of traps, right? Strolling in the passage, examining the surrounding environment, Mika's eyes were full of amusement. He wasn't worried or afraid of the traps and mechanisms at all. In fact, his heart was full of anticipation. As the first step towards his training, traps and mechanisms occupied a large part of Mika's training career. After returning to the error world, sometimes when he was free, he would go to play in the trap forest that Yahweh had prepared for Ermid and Melly, re-experiencing that thrilling feeling. Mika really enjoyed challenging traps and mechanisms. I wonder what differences there are between the traps in this trick tower and those in the forest. With curiosity about the trick tower, Mika continued to delve deeper. Similar scenes were also occurring on Melly's side. Having the same experiences as Mika, she also enjoyed this feeling of overcoming challenges. Facing various traps and mechanisms, she continuously relied on her own experience, physique, and wisdom to pass through various checkpoints, progressing smoothly. On another side, Ermid, who had joined Gon, Killua, Kurapika, and Orario to form a group of 5, was also continuously advancing deeper. Luckily Ermid joined us, otherwise we might have been stuck here until the end. Walking in the passage, Kurapika couldn't help but sigh. The others nodded in agreement. It should be known that before Ermid came down, the 4 of them had waited for a long time. That's right, if I were eliminated because of lack of ability, I might not have so many complaints. But if I were eliminated without even getting started because we didn't have enough people, I wouldn't be content even if I died. Orario said through gritted teeth. Hearing Orio's words, Gon, Killua, and Kurapika all shuddered. Just thinking about it was terrifying. Then let's work together to pass this test. Because Ermid replaced Tonpa from the original work, Gon's group not only progressed very smoothly, but the team's harmony was also far beyond that of the team in the original work. After all, there was no Tonpa to cause trouble here, and the 5 of them were already familiar with each other before. This made them pass the previous checkpoints very smoothly. Soon, the 5 of them arrived at the place to fight with the prisoners in the trick tower. As the third phase of the hunter exam, besides the trick tower itself, there was also a checkpoint to fight to the death with criminals. These prisoners were all extremely evil existences. Each of them needed to spend more than 100 years in prison. And as long as they defeated the examinees present, they would get a huge reduction in their sentences. Because Ermid's group had 5 people, to win this checkpoint, they needed to win 3 out of 5 matches to achieve victory. As for the dueling method, it was naturally decided by the prisoners. Then let me take the first match. Twirling the spear in her hand, Ermid volunteered. Although Mika had reminded her earlier not to stand out too much, the previous traps had sparked her desire to fight, making her want to battle. Hearing Ermid's volunteering, Kurapika and the others naturally didn't say anything. Although Ermid looked even younger than Gon and Killua, since she came to take the hunter exam, she naturally had confidence. Stepping onto the extended passage to the central dueling arena, Ermid calmly looked at her opponent. So, how do you want to fight? How to fight? Of course, it's a fight to the death. Throwing off the prison clothes that covered his entire body, the first criminal laughed ferociously. He flexed the muscles in his arms, staring intently at Ermid, his eyes full of killing intent. Then come on. Wielding her spear, Ermid observed the opponent's state. From the physical perspective, the opponent's physical qualities should be about the same as hers. But what the strong possess is not just the body. Die! The muscular man leaped, jumping towards where Ermid was. The throat. I see, so confident in yourself. From the opponent's actions, Ermid instantly read his thoughts. He wanted to crush her throat, making her unable to surrender, then torture her to pass these 72 hours, thereby achieving their victory. You attacked first. Water breathing, ripple strike thrust. Using the water breathing technique that had been completely altered by Yahweh, Ermid's spear instantly pierced the opponent's throat. Jumping into the air without knowing anything about your enemy is nothing short of dying. Hope you'll remember this in your next life. With that said, Ermid flung the corpse hanging on her spear away, then turned to walk back. Chapter 35 Netero's Teachings, Mika's Quest for Perfect 10. Second place, number 301 Gidarakuru, 12 hours and 2 minutes. Emerging from the passage, Gidarakuru glanced at Hisoka sitting in a corner of the circular hall and said with a light chuckle, I figured you'd already reached the finish line. At this moment, the hall where Gidarakuru and Hisoka were located was the endpoint of the third test. In this 72-hour test, only 12 hours had passed, yet 2 people had already completed the course. Hearing Gidarakuru's words, Hisoka leisurely turned his head. Just then, 2 stone doors in this hall filled with entrances slowly opened. Ha ha ha, I'm first place. A voice rang out before the person appeared. Third place, number 405 Mika, 12 hours and 3 minutes. Fourth place, number 294 Hanzo, 12 hours and 3 minutes. Are you an idiot? Can't you see there are already 2 people here? Mika said with a light laugh as he walked out of the stone door, addressing Hanzo who was shouting and jumping out from the opposite door. After 12 hours and 3 minutes, Mika had reached the test's endpoint. Although he could have arrived faster in theory, it wouldn't have made much difference. The ranking in the third test only affected the order of drawing lots for the fourth test and the order of proceeding to the final test site, neither of which mattered much to him. Therefore, after thoroughly experiencing the traps and mechanisms of this other world during the third test, Mika arrived at the finish line with a satisfied expression. Among the 4 people here, except for that Hanzo, the other 2 probably didn't intend to compete for first place either, Mika thought to himself. Ah! How could this happen? How could I be in 4th place? After hearing Mika's teasing, Hanzo clutched his head and wailed in agony. Watching Hanzo's antics, Mika smiled and found a corner to sit down quietly, then began to meditate. As for Hisoka's gaze from across the room, he had no intention of acknowledging it. Right now, he only wanted to focus on his nin training. Last night, after becoming Netero's disciple, Mika had learned the most orthodox nin training methods from him. From the pre-awakening 10 4 major principles to the post-awakening nin 4 major principles, Netero had shared all the relevant theoretical knowledge with Mika. Netero understood clearly that for a genius like Mika, who could figure out the 4 major principles on his own, what he needed most now was theoretical support. With sufficient theoretical knowledge, he could continue to advance on the right path. Therefore, during the latter half of last night, Netero's task was to correct Mika's understanding of the 3 major principles he had already grasped and impart all the related theoretical knowledge to him. What I should do now is to refine my Ten, Zetsu, and Ren, and hone them to an extremely profound level, Mika thought. This way, when I develop Hatsu in the future, it will be much smoother. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, Mika began his Ten training. As one of the foundations of Nin, the strength of Ten equates to Nin's defensive capability. Moreover, in the Ten state, one can continuously strengthen their physical body and even achieve eternal youth. Therefore, the role of Ten is extremely important. To train this ability to a satisfactory level, one must be able to maintain the Ten state even while sleeping and keep it active around the clock. However, besides Nin training, Mika also needed to think about his own Nin ability. As the culmination of Nin, the ability formed by Hatsu is the essence of this power system. Nin attributes vary from person to person, and there are 6 types in total: enhancement, emission, transmutation, manipulation, conjuration, and specialization. Each type has different effects based on its category. Enhancement strengthens one's natural abilities or weapons, maximizing attack, defense, and healing capabilities. Emission aura can maintain its power away from the body, be projected to distant locations, and can change shape, attack enemies, or carry out commands. Transmutation can change the properties or shape of produced aura, involving any alteration of Nan's nature, but always maintaining its energy properties. Manipulation can inject one's Nan into objects to control them, such as controlling others by injecting Nan into their bodies. Conjuration can transform one's aura into desired objects, materializing aura into tangible weapons for attacks. Specialization, any Nan abilities that don't fall into the above 5 categories are classified here. The success rate of mastering these 6 types varies depending on the user's innate attributes. Their relationship forms a hexagonal shape. Enhancement, transmutation, conjuration, specialization, manipulation, emission, enhancement. For example, an enhancer has a 100% success rate in learning enhancement abilities. However, for adjacent types like transmutation and emission, the success rate drops to 80%. For more distant types like manipulation and conjuration, it's only 60%. As for specialization, non-specialists have a 0% chance of learning specialization abilities. To determine one's Nan type, Netero taught Mika the water divination technique from the Shinjin-ryu school. The method involves placing a leaf on a glass of water and surrounding the glass with both hands while using Nan. The changes in the water indicate the user's Nan type. Enhancement, water volume increases. Transmutation, water taste changes. Conjuration, impurities appear in the water. Emission, water color changes. Manipulation, the leaf moves. Specialization, any phenomenon different from the other 5 types. Based on last night's test, when Mika used his Nan, impurities appeared in the water, indicating that his Nan type is conjuration. Conjuration, materializing my Nan to create weapons for battle. Mika pondered. What kind of weapon should I create? Mika fell into deep thought. Theoretically, conjuration can materialize anything, including matter, space, Nan abilities, and consciousness. Moreover, weapons conjured with aura usually aren't just simple weapons but often come with unique abilities. For instance, in the Phantom Troop, Shizuku's vacuum cleaner can suck up any non-living thing. Cordopi's forgeries possess the properties of N. In the future, Kurapika's dowsing chain can force the bound person into a Zetsu state. Each ability is distinct and has its own characteristics. Examining himself, Mika gradually formed an idea. Although there are various bizarre abilities in the hunter world, that's not my style. I often lead Ermit and melee, but that's because I know in advance, Mika thought. If we exclude the advantage of information, I'm not actually the type with an exceptionally sharp mind. Moreover, my Nan ability should match my style, just like Hisoka's. Although his ability isn't particularly strong or bizarre, when combined with Hisoka's powerful adaptability, it becomes extremely troublesome. At the same time, I need to consider my special nature. After all, I'm someone who frequently travels between different worlds. After considering his various requirements, Mika's face showed a troubled expression. This was indeed quite challenging. Chapter 36, Hunter's Trials, Test of Skill and Strategy. As Mika was practicing Nan and conceptualizing his Nan ability, the number of people passing the test around him gradually increased. After 30 hours had passed, Meli's figure appeared in Mika's sight. Congratulations, you've passed the 3rd phase, Mika said. Hehe, this is my true ability. Meli laughed lightly, patted the dust off her clothes, and sat down beside Mika. By the way, you must have encountered a criminal too, right? How did you get through it? Meli asked curiously. A criminal, hey. Recalling the criminal he encountered, Mika's lips curved into a cheerful smile. That guy wanted to fight me to the death. Ah, isn't that just asking for death? The examinees who made it to this stage are no pushovers. He chose the most foolish method, Meli said with a mocking smile. What about you? Mika inquired. The guy I met was particularly interesting, a very clever fellow. He actually challenged me to a battle of wits. It was hilarious, Meli said, continuously describing her encounter. Watching her smiling face, Mika listened attentively. Only after she finished did he respond with a smile, that sounds interesting indeed. Right? Playing games is always more fun. Fighting to the death is too boring, Meli agreed. I wonder what kind of opponent Ermit will face. I'm really looking forward to it. Melly continued. Speaking of which, why are Ermit and the others so slow? I remember their group was quite strong. Recalling Ermit's group's strength, Melly couldn't help but furrow her brows. Logically, given their abilities, they should have reached the endpoint quickly. They must have encountered some trouble, Mika said thoughtfully. Just as Mika said, Ermit's group indeed faced a challenge. The sealed room that trapped Gon and the others for 50 hours in the original story didn't appear. After Ermit's victory, Gon, who followed, also won easily. Seeing the opponent quickly backed into a corner, and that Ermit and Gon, who were about his age, had already taken action, Killua couldn't resist participating in the third round. Kurapika and Leorio naturally didn't object to this. After all, things were going so smoothly on their side that even if they lost one round because of Killua, they were confident they could win it back. Therefore, Killua replaced Kurapika as the contestant for the third round. On the criminals' side, due to the quick defeat of the first two, the dismembering serial killer who was originally planned to be the final challenger couldn't hold back anymore and decided to take action personally. The fraudster who was supposed to fight in the third round was pinned against the wall for questioning this decision. As a result, the two who were supposed to meet in the fifth round in the original story encountered each other in the third round. The outcome was, of course, not unexpected. The most terrifying killer in Zaban City's history, responsible for over 100 deaths and sentenced to over 900 years in prison, was instantly defeated by Killua. Thus, the 50 hours lost due to Leorio in the original story didn't occur. The group of 5 quickly arrived near the exit. Here, they encountered the choice question from the original story. Option 1, all 5 pass, entering a passage that would take at least 45 hours to reach the end. Option 2, 3 pass, tying the other 2 to the wall of this room, then entering a passage that would take only 3 minutes to reach the end. In this room, the examiners had thoughtfully prepared various weapons. Faced with this choice question designed to strain their relationships, the 5 chose the first option without hesitation, entering the passage that would take 45 hours to reach the end. After all, they still had plenty of time left. Without Tonpa's influence, the 5's progress was even quicker, to the extent that they hadn't even used up 20 hours so far. So, after spending 60 hours, Ermit and the other 4 finally reached the endpoint. I see, Mika said, his face showing sudden understanding after hearing Ermit's account. Compared to the original story, without Tonpa, Ermit's group of 5 progressed more smoothly, to the extent that when they encountered that choice question, they still had ample time. This made their choice without any hesitation. After all, they all trusted their companions. This also led to them not discovering the shortcut from the original story. Because the 2 passages were placed side by side at the choice question, they could have opened the 5-person passage and then used the weapons on the wall to break through the wall between the 2 passages. But this was also normal. After all, in the original story, Gon was able to think of this method because Tonpa and Leorio had easily cut into the surrounding walls when they were fighting with weapons. Now, without a reason to fight, the 5 naturally couldn't discover the shortcut. But this is fine too, after all, they've all passed, Mika thought casually. Seeing Ermit sit down beside him, Mika skillfully lay down on her lap. Although he had also lain on Melly's lap during breaks from training earlier, this side was indeed more reassuring. As Ermit's group of 5 reached the endpoint, the remaining 10 hours quickly passed. After the examiner announced the end of the third phase test, Mika, waking from his training, looked around and surprisingly found Tonpa's figure. As expected of someone who has had multiple chances to become a true hunter, he indeed has some skills, Mika thought. But he hasn't chosen to give up this time. Is he still planning to cause trouble for Leorio? Isn't he being too persistent? Shaking his head, Mika threw these thoughts out of his mind. With the end of the third phase test, the fourth phase test seamlessly began. At this time, there were still 27 people participating in the hunter exam. It was exactly the 24 people from the original story plus Mika's group of 3. The first thing they had to do was draw lots in the order they reached the endpoint in the third phase. Mika, being the third person to reach the endpoint, naturally drew third. After everyone had completed drawing lots, the examiner of the third phase test announced the rules for the fourth phase test to everyone. In the next 7 days, the 27 of them would be dropped onto an isolated island to engage in a hunt and be hunted number plate battle. The condition for victory was that at the end of the 7 days when the test ended, the examinees would bring the corresponding number plates to where the examiner was located. The numbers they had drawn now were the numbers they needed to hunt. Different numbers had different point values. The number plate they carried and the hunting number they drew were both worth 3 points. Apart from these, other number plates were only worth 1 point. Therefore, the easiest way to win was to keep one's own number plate, obtain the hunted person's number plate, thus gaining 6 points, and then hide until the 7 days were over. After hearing the examiner's words, the vast majority of people quickly hid their number plates. Only a very few people who were extremely confident in themselves didn't make any moves. Number 53, I remember that's Pakal, right? Mika thought seriously, looking at the number plate he had drawn. According to the original story's development, Pakal was also one of the people who ultimately obtained hunter qualification. But he probably won't be able to become a hunter this time. Mika was very confident about this. However, not becoming a hunter this time might not be a bad thing for him. In the original story, after becoming a hunter, Pakal died at the hands of Neferpitu during the Chimera Ant arc, which led to the Chimera Ants learning about Nin. If he couldn't pass this time, he would have to wait until 2 years later. This way, not encountering the Chimera Ants, he probably wouldn't die. After all, next year's spot should be Killua. Looking at it this way, this might be a good thing. Thinking of this, Mika couldn't help but smile. Chapter 37 Hunter and Prey, Nin Training, Fate of the Contestants. Number 53, who was that again? Ermid pondered, looking at Mika's number plate. Silly, it's that guy called Pakal, Melly said with a light laugh. Like Mika, she had memorized everyone's numbers. What numbers did you two draw? Mika asked. Without hesitation, Melly replied, Ermid drew 198, one of the 3 brothers over there. And I drew 80, that woman with the sniper rifle. I see. Mika's gaze swept back and forth among the crowd, lingering on those 3 people. I understand. I'll take all 3 of their number plates. Mika spoke calmly. According to the upcoming rules, Mika's group would be sent to the outskirts of the isolated island. Then enter one by one every 5 minutes based on the order they completed the 3rd phase. As the 3rd person to complete the 3rd phase test, Mika would be the 3rd to enter the island, and the number plates they needed were all behind him. This way, as long as he remembered their scents, Mika could capture them instantly the moment they entered the island. Ending it directly? Not playing anymore? Melly asked reluctantly. If you want to play, there will be plenty of chances later. We need to make full use of these 7 days. I'll teach you the methods to cultivate Nin abilities during this time, aiming to help you awaken your Nin within these 7 days, Mika explained. Learning Nin, hey. Hearing this, Melly's expression immediately turned serious. Ermid, sitting silently beside them listening, also nodded slightly. I understand. Melly could distinguish the priorities of matters. As Mika said, there were many places worth exploring in this world, no need to fixate on this one test. Alright then, you two should relax your minds and bodies for now, Mika advised. Prepare yourselves fully for the training. Understood. Without making everyone wait too long, the speedboat to send them off soon appeared before them. After boarding the speedboat, feeling bored as Ermid and Melly were concentrating, Mika started wandering around the boat. Hey, Orario, what number did you draw? Mika asked directly. How can you be so straightforward? Orario complained weakly upon hearing Mika's question. However, despite his verbal complaint about Mika's abruptness, his hand didn't stop moving. Although Mika didn't go through the 3rd phase adventure with him, Orario hadn't forgotten that Mika had saved him and gone from Hisoka's hands in the Milsey wetlands during the 1st phase. Orario had a very good impression of Mika. Looking at the number 246 that Orario took out, Mika said with a smile, Number 246, that's Ponzu, right? Ponzu. Seeing that Mika knew who it was, Orario quickly asked. In response, Mika secretly pointed at Ponzu sitting on the other side, then whispered, It's her, but you should be careful. She probably controls bees, in her hat. Thanks, Mika. No need to thank me, we're all friends. Saying this, Mika waved his hand and walked forward with a smile. The joy of spoilers couldn't be greater than this. Soon, this yacht carrying all the remaining examinees arrived at the destination. And with this, the 4th phase test officially began. Sitting quietly at the bow waiting, it was soon Mika's turn to go ashore. Well then, I'll go first. Waving to Ermid and Melly, Mika's figure disappeared into the forest. Quickly running towards the nearest tallest tree trunk, upon reaching it, Mika began to quietly observe, waiting for his targets to arrive. Soon, without making Mika wait long, Pakal walked off the boat. Watching his figure, Mika quickly disappeared from his original spot. Number 105, looks like I need to ambush around here for a while, Pakal muttered to himself as he walked through the dense forest, looking for a suitable hiding spot. But just then, a voice suddenly reached his ears. Good idea. If possible, could you please hand over your number plate? What? Quickly turning around, knocking an arrow and drawing his bow to full tension, Pakal stared intently at Mika standing on a tree branch. Am I your prey? Pakal asked loudly, sweat streaming down his nervous forehead. After reaching the endpoint of Trick Tower, during his free time, he had chatted with Hanzo. Therefore, he knew that Mika was a top expert like Hanzo, who had reached the endpoint in just 12 hours. Pakal was well aware of how difficult Trick Tower was. Even using all his effort, he had still taken over 30 hours. From this, he could roughly guess the other's strength. If he were to act as the hunter, he might have a chance of defeating the other. Pakal was quite confident in his concealment abilities. But in a direct confrontation, this wasn't his forte. You now have only two choices. First, put down your number plate and turn around to leave, to find other opportunities to gather 6 points. Second, choose to fight, then have to give up this test due to severe injuries, waiting for next year's chance. So, what's your choice? As he spoke, Mika entered the state of Ren, pressing his aura mixed with malice towards Pakal. This is... Feeling the aura emanating from Mika, Pakal's pupils contracted sharply, his whole body trembling. He had never experienced such a sense of pressure before. Wait, I surrender. Taking out his number plate and placing it on the ground, Pakal, his body already drenched in sweat, slowly backed away. Only after Mika waved at him did he instantly dash into the forest. An excellent decision. As they say, the wise adapt to circumstances. Once life is gone, everything is gone. Nodding, Mika returned to the tree trunk where he had been waiting before and continued his vigil. After Pakal, Meli soon joined up with Mika. Therefore, the number 80 who came later was taken by Meli alone. As time passed, the other examinees successively arrived on this isolated island. While others were just beginning to adapt to their surroundings and hadn't started hunting yet. Mika's group of 3 had already completed their hunt, holding their respective 6 points and starting to look for a place to train. This place will do. Looking at the cliff before him, Mika satisfactorily determined their residence for the next 7 days. Then let's start the Nen training, Meli urged, her curiosity about Nen abilities already at its peak. Alright, let's begin. Seeing their curiosity, Mika started explaining the knowledge related to Nen and the training methods for the 10 major principles. In this world, there are 2 methods to awaken Nen users. One is to gradually open the body's aura nodes through training in the 10 major principles, then becoming an Nen user. The second is for an Nen user to use their own aura to rapidly open all the aura nodes in another person's body. Of these 2 methods, the former is the orthodox method, while the latter is unorthodox. For the latter, if the Nen user's technique isn't mature enough, it can cause various injuries to the person's body. The reason Gon and Killua chose the second method in the original story was firstly because they had no time left, and secondly because Wing, who awakened them, had mature techniques. But Mika, as a newcomer, didn't have such techniques. Therefore, what Ermit and Meli needed to do was to use the first method to train, gradually awakening their Nen. Chapter 38 Hunter Candidates, Rivalries, and Friendships Tested. According to Gon and Killua's future teacher, Wing. Nen is a skill anyone can learn if they work hard enough, which is why the selection process for learners is so stringent. Otherwise, it would result in criminal groups like the Phantom Troop, who are ruthless Nen users. Even for a genius, it takes about a month to awaken Nen. However, monsters can achieve it much faster. For instance, Gon and Killua. In Wing's view, Gon and Killua could awaken Nen in just a week due to their exceptional talent, which is said to be 1 in a million. Although Ermit and Meli may not have the same innate talent for Nen as Gon and Killua, they possess magic. Their long-term manipulation of magic gives them a deeper understanding of their life energy. Thus, after mastering the 4 major principles of Nen training, Ermit and Meli's progress was remarkably fast. A week was enough for them to awaken their Nen. During this week, the other 24 participants on the island continued to hunt and collect their target's number badges. Although Mika's group had already secured victory early on and did not interfere with the subsequent hunts, their presence still impacted the test. For example, because Mika had taken badge number 198 in advance, Hanzo was not fooled by Killua's trickery and successfully obtained badge number 197. However, many events remained unchanged. Gon's target was still Hisoka. The one who originally targeted Gon, Jaretta, drew Mika's number instead, but couldn't find Mika and ultimately died at Hisoka's hands. Despite the differences brought by Mika's group, those who passed the test remained the same due to their absolute strength and luck. 7 days later, in response to the examiner's calls, 11 people appeared before them: Hisoka, Gidarakuru, Gon, Killua, Kurapika, Leorio, Hanzo, Badaro, Mika, Ermid, and Meli. Among the 11, only Hisoka presented 4 badges, while the others each had 2. With the 4th test concluded, the 11 were taken back to the Hunter Association's airship to prepare for the final test. In Mika's resting room, after filling a cup with water and placing a leaf on it, Mika looked at Ermid and Meli with anticipation. After a week of training, they had awakened their Nin. Although they currently only mastered 10 among the 4 major principles of Nin, they decided to test their affinities out of curiosity. Ermid, you go first, Meli suggested. Nodding, Ermid placed her hands on either side of the cup and activated her Nin. After a moment, a few drops of water overflowed from the cup. Enhancement type, Hui? Not too surprising, Mika said with a slight smile. Ermid's straightforward personality seemed fitting for this type. Looks like you'll be a powerful healer, Meli said, having become well versed in gaming terminology over time. A powerful healer, Hui? Sounds interesting, Ermid said, nodding seriously before pushing the cup toward Meli. Now it's your turn, Meli. All right, I can't wait, Meli said, placing her hands on either side of the cup and activating her Nin. The changes in the cup were different from the 5 primary types: enhancement, manipulation, emission, conjuration, and transmutation. Crimson patterns spread through the water, creating a surreal, dreamlike effect. This is specialization, Meli said, uncertain. A change outside the 5 primary types likely means specialization, Mika confirmed. Doesn't it resemble your magic dream? Ermid suggested. It does, indeed, Meli said, nodding thoughtfully, already contemplating her Nin ability. All right, you're still far from constructing an ability. For now, focus on the basics, Mika said, correcting their course. The importance of a solid foundation in any ability couldn't be overstated. After the 11 candidates returned to the airship, the Hunter Association examiners called them one by one for interviews. Hisoka was called first, followed by Mika. As Mika walked up to the 2nd floor, he passed Hisoka, who was leaving the reception room. Both of their auras flared momentarily before calming down. Ignoring Hisoka's intentions, Mika pushed open the door to the reception room, finding only Netero inside. Yo, Master, it's just you. Indeed, I'm in charge of the final test, Netero said, shaking his clipboard and gesturing for Mika to sit. So, why do you want to become a hunter? Netero asked. To learn Nin, of course. Among the other 10 candidates, who do you care about the most? Care about? If you mean who I'm wary of, it would be Hisoka and Gidarakuru. They're seasoned Nin users, and I might not be a match for them yet. Who among the 10 do you least want to face? I don't really mind who I face. But if I have to say, I'd rather not fight Ermid, Meli, Gon, Killua, Kurapika, or Leorio. They're friends and family. Understood, Netero said, nodding before waving Mika away. Now, off you go. Hey, Master, aren't you interested in my progress? Get out and stop bothering me, Netero replied, annoyed. Seriously, don't you care at all? Mika grumbled, glaring at Netero before leaving. Watching Mika's retreating figure, Netero chuckled. He could already tell Mika's progress without Mika having to show it. The steady, refined, and vast aura Mika exuded was proof enough. What a monstrous growth rate, Netero marveled. With everyone interviewed, the candidates relaxed until they reached the final test location, a hotel managed by the Hunter Association. After gathering everyone, Netero announced the final test, a one-on-one elimination tournament. The match UPS and order were Hanzo gon Ermid Meli Killua Gidarakuru Orario Badaro Hisoka Kurapika Mika. Chapter 39 Mika Killing Intent, End of Exam. Hanzo gon Ermid Meli Killua Gidarakuru Orario Badaro Hisoka Kurapika Mika. The final test is a one-on-one elimination tournament, but only one person will fail, Netero explained. Anyone who wins even one match will receive a hunter license and become a true hunter. Hearing this, everyone turned their attention to the match chart. The matches were divided into two brackets. The first bracket included Hanzo, Gon, Ermid, Meli, Killua, and Gidarakuru. The second bracket had Leorio, Badaro, Hisoka, Kurapika, and Mika. In this test, each person had at least 2 chances. Those like Hanzo and Gon had up to 6 chances. As long as they won 1 out of 6 matches, they could become hunters. Thus, the further to the sides on the chart, the more opportunities one had, and the closer to the center, the fewer opportunities one had. This seemingly unfair arrangement was based on the cumulative results of the previous 4 tests, various impression scores, and the earlier interviews. The more chances someone had, the more qualified they were deemed to be a hunter, based on their aptitude. Killua was the most unable to accept this arrangement. Seeing Gon tied for first with Hanzo in their group, while he was second last, he couldn't understand why he, who was stronger, was less qualified to be a hunter than Gon. However, whether Killua understood or not didn't matter to the others, and the final test began. The first match was Hanzo versus Gon. The gap in their strength was enormous, and Gon was no match for Hanzo. According to the final test rules, this test could not result in death. If someone killed another, they would lose the qualification to become a hunter, and the other participants would win by default. Moreover, each match required a surrender for a win to be declared. No matter how badly beaten someone was, if they didn't surrender, it wasn't a victory. Gon refused to surrender, even when tortured by Hanzo and despite having his arm broken. This put Hanzo in a difficult position, unable to deal with Gon's resolve. Ultimately, Gon's spirit moved Hanzo, leading him to surrender. Next is our turn, Kurapika. Mika said to Kurapika after medical personnel took Gon away for emergency treatment. After the first match in the first bracket ended, the first match in the second bracket was Mika versus Kurapika. Upon hearing Mika, Kurapika immediately extended his palm and said, "I forfeit the next match." Everyone was shocked, clearly not expecting this. However, Kurapika had his reasons. As friends who knew each other since Whale Island, Kurapika had fought Mika before and always lost easily. He couldn't use Gon's method of refusing to surrender either, as it would feel like receiving charity from a friend. Plus, Kurapika still had more chances. Mika quickly understood Kurapika's reasoning. "Do your best next time," he encouraged, patting Kurapika on the shoulder. With Mika's immediate victory, the next match was Hanzo versus Ermid. Ermid stated, "I won't refuse to surrender like Gon. We'll fight fairly, and I'll surrender if I lose." Good. Hanzo was relieved. He wasn't afraid of strong opponents but found it impossible to deal with someone like Gon. "Let's begin," the referee announced, and Hanzo and Ermid started their match. In no time, the gap in their strength was clear. Ermid could only defend against Hanzo's attacks, unable to counter. Mika wasn't surprised. Among the participants, excluding Mika's group, Hisoka and Gidarakuru were on a level of their own due to their nin abilities. Among the non-nin users, Killua and Hanzo were similarly dominant, though Hanzo was still stronger than Killua. Both had overwhelming strength compared to others. Mika realized that the people in this world had higher physical limits than those in his original world, Orario. Even though many of these participants had physical prowess equivalent to Orario's level 2 adventurers, their overall combat abilities mostly hovered around the upper ranks of level 1. Only a few reached level 2. Hanzo and Killua not only had level 2 combat abilities but were also among the strongest in that category. Among Mika's group, only he could match them. Ermid and Meli were not yet at that level. Despite the strength difference, Ermid had exceptional defensive abilities, a trait of her race, Yahweh Familia. They had endured countless trials under their goddess, making them unparalleled in defense. After exhausting various techniques, Hanzo finally won due to his stamina advantage. "Why are my opponents always so troublesome?" he grumbled, panting heavily. Ermid, who lost, was helped to rest by Mika. Under Meli's cover, she secretly drank a stamina recovery potion and rested in Mika's arms, drawing envious looks from some onlookers. Seeing this, Melly leaned on Mika's shoulder, pretending to rest, which turned the envy into jealousy and anger. After Hanzo and Ermid's match, the next match was Kurapika vs Hisoka. Midway through the battle, Hisoka whispered something to Kurapika and then forfeited. Following this, the next match was Ermid vs Melly. As Ermid and Melly prepared to battle, the audience couldn't help but feel excited. They were the only two women in this hunter exam, both with special connections to Mika, and their previous actions had already intrigued everyone. I forfeit. Ermid declared without even opening her eyes, disappointing the eager crowd. As teammates, Ermid and Melly had sparred countless times, easily over 80 or even 100. Their close combat skills were extremely close, with Ermid generally having a slight edge. However, after the previous battle, Ermid was already exhausted. Fighting Melly in her current state would be suicidal. Thus, she chose to forfeit. Following Ermid's surrender, the next match began between Hisoka and Botaro. Botaro fought fiercely against Hisoka but refused to surrender. After a particularly brutal fall, Hisoka whispered something in Botaro's ear, leading Botaro to concede immediately. After Hisoka's victory, it was time for Ermid to face Killua, but Killua immediately forfeited. He had no desire to fight the exhausted Ermid and was confident in his ability to win the upcoming matches. Thanks, Killua. Mika waved appreciatively, to which Killua confidently responded with a wave. According to the schedule, Orario was supposed to fight Botaro next. However, Orario requested the referee to delay the match, allowing Botaro time to recover from his injuries against Hisoka. Thus, the match between Killua and Gidarakuru was moved up. Leaning against the wall of the test hall, Mika watched as Killua and Gidarakuru stared each other down. Knowing the original story, Mika recognized Gidarakuru as Illumi Zaldik, Killua's brother. This confrontation would lead to Killua's breakdown and Botaro's death, ultimately resulting in Killua's disqualification from the hunter exam. Mika chose not to intervene in this event. Despite Killua losing his qualification, his strength meant he could pass any future hunter exam he chose to take. This setback would lead Gon to seek Killua out at his home, cementing their friendship. Despite understanding the significance of the brothers' conflict, Mika felt a bit of irritation towards Illumi. As the referee announced the start of the match, Illumi, disguised with Nin, revealed his true appearance. Seeing his brother, Killua tensed up. Illumi's provocative words further destabilized Killua. To provoke Killua further, Illumi claimed that Killua and Gon were not friends. Orario loudly refuted this, earnestly telling Killua, Gon already considers you his friend. Hearing this, Killua was momentarily touched, but Illumi quickly declared that if that was true, Gon needed to be killed. He turned as if to go after Gon, causing Kurapika, Orario, Ermid and Melly to block his path to the medical room. Mika, meanwhile, stood still, but his aura filled the hall with a menacing intent. Those without Nin shivered, while those who had awakened their Nin abilities looked at Mika in surprise. The sheer intensity of his aura suggested he had taken countless lives. Mika's killing intent was a standard trait for adventurers from Orario, where they lived on the edge of life and death. In Orario, this aura meant nothing among fellow adventurers, but here in the hunter world, it was potent. Mika discovered its utility after awakening his Nin, as it intensified his malice during Ren. Mika's actions spoke louder than any words. After awakening his Nin and mastering its basic techniques, his fear of Hisoka and Illumi diminished significantly. In the hunter world, the rule was that only Nin users could effectively combat other Nin users. Now, Mika saw Nin as just another form of magic, and he no longer feared Hisoka or Illumi. Feeling Mika's pressure, Illumi glanced at him before chuckling, just kidding. I still need a hunter license, and killing someone would disqualify me. With that, the sudden tension dissipated. Killua, overwhelmed by his fear of his brother, quickly surrendered, unable to fight back. It's over, Mika said softly, watching Killua grapple with his inner turmoil. The events unfolded as they did in the original story. Botaro, preparing for his next match, was instantly killed by a rampaging Killua, unable to react in time. As a result, Killua was disqualified for breaking the rules, and Orario won by default. Thus, the hunter exam concluded with only 9 people out of millions passing: Mika, Ermid, Melly, Gon, Kurapika, Orario, Hanzo, Hisoka, and Illumi. They would now face a final secret assessment to determine their true qualification, their potential as Nin users. Chapter 40 Spar with Hyakusha Key Cannon, Reunion in Heaven's Arena. Slowly opening his eyes and looking at the dojo before him, Mika's gaze remained calm and steady. Awakening from his meditation, Mika quietly stood up. At that moment, the energy flowing through him was as vast as the ocean, yet as calm as a windless sea. It had been over 2 months since the end of the hunter exam. During this time, Mika had been studying under Netero for over 2 months. In these 2 months, Mika not only mastered the 4 major principles of Nen but also became proficient in their applied techniques. What an enviable talent! In just over 2 months, I have nothing left to teach you. From now on, your training will rely on your own efforts. Netero stroked his beard, a satisfied smile on his face. During this training period, using the excuse of tracking Mika's progress, Netero and Mika engaged in dozens of battles of varying sizes. From initially being on the defensive to now barely holding his own, Mika's progress in martial arts was as rapid as his mastery of Nen. Though Mika had yet to meet Netero's expectation of an all-out battle, the thrill of a fight without using Nen was something Netero had not felt in a long time. This undoubtedly made him very satisfied. Thank you for your guidance, Chairman. Without it, I wouldn't have grown so quickly. Mika was very grateful for Netero's teachings. Netero was Mika's 3rd teacher, following Yahweh and Sakonji Urokodaki, and Mika would never forget his kindness. Haha, I just did what I wanted to do. But it is indeed time to part ways. I have left the association's matters to others for too long. If I don't return soon, they might come looking for me. With his hands behind his back, Netero casually asked, "Are you heading to the Heavens Arena next? Finding suitable opponents there won't be easy. I have no particular interest in the Heavens Arena. I'm just going there to find someone." 2 months ago, upon learning of Killua's departure, Gon decided to go to Killua's home. Concerned for his safety, Kurapika and Orario followed. Along with them were Meli and Ermid. After spending time together, Meli and Ermid had come to consider Gon a friend. With their friend in trouble, how could they refuse to help? Besides, they were still curious about this new world. Thus, they planned to go on a trip. Mika, unable to go with them due to Netero's training, had given them his level 1 longsword for protection. They agreed to meet at the Heavens Arena. Now, with Mika's training completed, it was time to reunite with them. I see. Netero nodded slightly, then smiled. Is there anything you want to say before we part? Hearing this, Mika's expression became serious. He then earnestly said, I want to spar with your Nen ability. Just as I hoped. A smile quickly spread across Netero's face. With a clap of his hands, a massive golden statue of 1,000 armed cannon appeared behind him. Seeing this, Mika's eyes widened. The overwhelming pressure made his previously steady Nen energy waver. This is the Nen ability of the world's strongest man, the High Akushiki Cannon. Mika instantly charged forward, eager to experience the power of the High Akushiki Cannon firsthand. So that's the Heavens Arena. Looking at the towering structure in the distance, even Mika, who had seen the Tower of Babel, was filled with curiosity. Quickening his pace, Mika weaved through the streets and alleys, heading straight for the Heavens Arena. However, his speed soon slowed. Taking in the modern urban scenery around him, Mika found himself reminiscing. Come to think of it, I haven't really explored this world properly. Aside from wandering around the remote island when he first arrived at Whale Island, Mika and his companions had always been in mountains, forests, or isolated islands during the hunter exam. They had never been to such a bustling place. It's quite nostalgic. Looking at the various shops around him, Mika soon saw his reflection in the smooth glass, with bandages on his head. These were wounds from his recent battle with Netero. Although most of the minor injuries had healed, some of the more serious wounds still left marks. That old man didn't hold back at all. Remembering that battle, Mika's face darkened. He had experienced firsthand the terror of the High Akushiki Cannon. In short, he had been thoroughly beaten. Forget it, no point in dwelling on it. I should go find Meli and Ermid. His good mood ruined by the lingering injuries, Mika quickened his pace and soon arrived at the Heavens Arena. By now, Gon and Killua should be on the 200th floor. Meli and Ermid should be with them. Heading to the front desk, Mika asked the receptionist for the recent match schedule for the 200th floor. He quickly found Meli and Ermid's names. They both have their debut matches in a week. Looks like I arrived just in time. With a smile, Mika entered the elevator and pressed the button for the 200th floor. The Heavens Arena is the 4th tallest building in the Hunter world, standing at 991 meters with 251 floors. It is a tower primarily for martial arts competitions. Here, every 10 floors is a level. If you defeat your opponent, you gain the right to move to higher floors and face stronger opponents. The higher the floor, the bigger the prize money. Above the 100th floor, participants are also provided accommodation, with better rooms on higher floors. Thus, in the Hunter world, the Heavens Arena is known as the Sanctuary of Martial Artists, attracting martial artists from around the world. However, above the 200th floor, there are no ordinary martial artists. It is a world for non-users. Upon reaching the 200th floor, Mika quickly found their room after some inquiries. Standing outside Ermid's room, Mika knocked lightly. "Who is it?" "It's me. Mika." Upon hearing Mika's voice, both Ermid and Melly responded simultaneously from inside. The next moment, the door opened, and Ermid and Melly appeared before Mika. "It looks like you haven't stopped your training." Seeing the stable aura around them, Mika said with a smile. "Of course, we've had a lot of fun, but we didn't slack off on the tasks you gave us." Melly responded seriously. Ermid nodded firmly as well. "That's good." Mika nodded slightly, then said seriously, "After your matches this week, let's return to Orario for a while."
Thanks for listening.